Millionaire comes home early and can't believe his eyes. Richard Thompson cancelled the most important meeting of the quarter when his headache became unbearable. At 42 years old, the owner of 3 construction companies had never left the office before 9 in the evening, but that day something made him want to be home. It was when he opened the living room door that his world stopped. His housekeeper, Margaret, was examining his son Peter's ear with a professional otoscope. The 8-year-old boy, usually shy and quiet, was chatting excitedly about how he wanted to be a doctor when he grew up. "What's going on here?" Richard asked, feeling his heart race. Margaret quickly put the medical equipment away in a bag, but he had already seen everything. Their eyes met in a tense moment. "Mr. Richard, you're home early today," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Peter was complaining of ear pain. "Since when do you have this kind of equipment at home?" he questioned, walking toward the two. Peter got up from the green chair where he was sitting and ran to hug his father. "Daddy, Aunt Margaret knows everything about the human body. She taught me how the heart works this morning," said the boy with shining eyes. Richard felt a mix of confusion and suspicion. Margaret had worked for him for 2 years, always efficient and discreet. She had never mentioned medical knowledge. "Peter, go play in your room. I need to talk with Margaret," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "But Daddy, we haven't finished the lesson about—" "Now, Peter," Richard interrupted more firmly. The boy obeyed, but not before whispering something in Margaret's ear that made her smile sadly. When they were alone, a heavy silence fell between them. "Explain this to me." Richard crossed his arms, pointing to where the otoscope had disappeared. Margaret took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "Sir, I was studying medicine before I came to work here. I didn't finish, but I learned a lot about basic care. Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I thought you would fire me if you knew. Many employers don't like it when employees have an education." Richard remembered how he always avoided talking about her past. In fact, he realized he knew practically nothing about Margaret besides the fact that she was punctual and kept the house impeccable. "And these lessons you give to Peter?" "He always asked me questions about everything. He's a very smart child, sir. I started by answering his questions about why people get sick, and he wanted to know more." At that moment, Richard remembered how Peter had changed in recent months. Before, he hardly spoke, especially after the divorce. Now he came home from school talking about his dreams and plans for the future. "Margaret, why did you abandon medicine?" She looked away, fidgeting with her hands. "Family matters, sir. Sometimes life doesn't let us choose." During dinner, Peter wouldn't stop talking about how he wanted to have a practice when he grew up, to help children like him. Richard noticed how his son's eyes shone when he talked about medicine, a passion that clearly hadn't come out of nowhere. "Daddy, did you know the heart beats more than 100,000 times a day?" Peter asked, chewing his favorite pasta. "I didn't know," Richard replied, watching how knowledge flowed naturally from the boy. "Aunt Margaret taught me. She even knows how to use those devices doctors use." After Peter fell asleep, Richard decided to have a serious talk with Margaret. He found her in the kitchen, organizing the boy's medicines with a precision that now made sense. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. "Sit here," he indicated one of the chairs at the kitchen table. "I want to better understand your story." Margaret sat down hesitantly, as if she were about to receive a warning. "I started medical school at Johns Hopkins University when I was 20, she began, looking at her own hands. "I always dreamed of being a pediatrician. I loved taking care of children since I was little." "What happened?" "My father got sick during my 4th year of college. We didn't have money for treatments and I was an only child. I withdrew from school to work and pay the bills." Richard felt something stir in his chest. His own path had been the opposite, always financially privileged. "And after your father?" "He got better, thank God. But when I tried to return to college, I discovered I had missed the deadline to renew my enrollment. I tried to get into other universities, but I couldn't get the same scholarship again." "Why didn't you try a private one?" "Sir, I earn minimum wage here. A private medical school costs more than a car." Richard had never thought about that. For him, money for education was never a problem. He began to understand the magnitude of the sacrifice Margaret had made. "And how did you know Peter had an ear infection?" "I wasn't certain, but based on the symptoms he described and what I saw during the exam, it seemed likely. That's why I suggested you take him to the doctor tomorrow." "You made the correct diagnosis before a professional even saw him," Richard admitted, impressed. In the following days, Richard began to observe more closely the interactions between Margaret and Peter. He came home earlier, making excuses at the office. What he saw surprised him more each day. Margaret turned household chores into science lessons. While washing dishes, she explained the surface tension of water. When preparing lunch, she taught about nutrition and how the body processes food. Peter absorbed everything like a sponge. "Aunt Margaret, why do some people have high blood pressure?" Peter asked one Thursday afternoon. "It's when blood pushes against the walls of the blood vessels with too much force," she answered patiently, "like when you squeeze a garden hose too hard." Richard watched from the office door, fascinated by her natural teaching method. Peter asked questions he had never asked him. On Friday, when he arrived home, he found Peter drawing the human circulatory system with impressive accuracy for an 8-year-old. Margaret was beside him, correcting small details. "Daddy, come see how I draw the heart," Peter shouted excitedly. "That's very good, son," Richard approached, noticing the richness of detail. "Aunt Margaret said the heart is like a pump that never stops working. Just like Daddy at the office," Peter smiled. Richard looked at Margaret, who quickly averted her gaze. There was something in the way she cared for Peter that went far beyond the duties of an employee. On Saturday, Peter woke up with a fever. Richard was about to call the pediatrician when he noticed Margaret checking the boy's vital signs with a technique she clearly mastered. "Temperature 101.6, pulse normal, no neck stiffness," she murmured to herself, before noticing Richard was watching. "You were doing a medical assessment," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. "I'm sorry, sir. It's instinct. When I see a child with a fever, I automatically check the most important signs." "And what is your professional opinion?" Margaret hesitated before answering. "It seems like a simple virus, but if the fever rises above 102.2 or he starts vomiting, we need to take him to the hospital immediately." Richard called the pediatrician anyway. When the doctor arrived, he confirmed exactly what Margaret had said, a simple virus that would pass in a few days. "Do you have medical knowledge?" the pediatrician asked Margaret, impressed with the notes she had taken about Peter's condition. "A little," she replied modestly. After the doctor left and Peter fell asleep, Richard couldn't get that scene out of his head. He decided to do something he had never done before, find out more about Margaret's life. Monday morning, he called a private investigation company, not to spy but to understand. He wanted to know the real story of the woman who cared for his son with such affection. The results came on Wednesday. Margaret Wilson Davis, 29 years old, originally from Baltimore, studied 4.5 years of medicine at Johns Hopkins University between 2014 and 2019. Full scholarship student, always among the top of her class. Withdrew in March 2019 and never returned. But what impressed Richard the most was discovering that she supported 3 younger siblings. Her father had suffered a work accident that left him disabled, and she became the family's sole source of income at 24. There were recommendation letters from professors saying she was one of the most promising students they had ever known. One professor wrote that Margaret has a natural gift for caring for people, combined with exceptional intelligence for medicine. Richard put the papers in the drawer, but he couldn't stop thinking. That night he watched Margaret helping Peter with his homework, her patience, the way she explained difficult concepts simply, the genuine dedication. "Margaret," he called her after Peter went to sleep. "Yes, sir." "How long has it been since you had a day off?" She thought for a moment. "I don't remember, sir, but I don't mind. Peter is a special boy. He likes you very much." "I like him very much too," she smiled for the first time in the conversation. "Why did you choose pediatrics when you were in college?" The question took her by surprise. Margaret never expected him to know about her studies. "I've always connected with children. They're honest, curious, And when they're sick, they need someone who understands them, not just treats the illness. Richard realized she talked about medicine the same way he talked about business, with genuine passion. On Thursday, he came home and found Peter with a bandage on his knee. Before he could ask, Margaret explained, "He fell off his bike in the backyard. I cleaned the wound, applied antiseptic, and put on an appropriate bandage. No stitches needed." "Do you have a first aid kit?" "I have some basic supplies, nothing fancy." Richard went to Peter's room to check on him. He found his son excited, showing the bandage to his action figures. "Daddy, Aunt Margaret said I'll be healed in a week if I take good care of the wound." "And will you take care of it?" "I will. She taught me how to change the bandage by myself tomorrow." That night, Richard had a different kind of insomnia. It wasn't because of business, but because he was rethinking everything he thought he knew about the people around him. On Friday, he decided to test her. He pretended to feel unwell during lunch, complaining of chest pain and shortness of breath. Margaret appeared in the living room within seconds. "Sir, sit here," she said, helping him to the sofa. "Breathe slowly with me." She discreetly checked his pulse and observed his breathing. "Is the pain in the center of your chest or on the left side? Are you feeling numbness in your arms?" Richard was impressed with her professional assessment. "It was just a test," he admitted. "I wanted to see how you would react." Margaret looked at him with a mixture of relief and disappointment. "Please don't joke about that, sir. Heart problems are serious." "I apologize. It was wrong of me." That weekend, Richard made a decision that would change everything. He decided to investigate Margaret's family situation more deeply, not to fire her, but to better understand the woman who was caring for his son with such dedication. He discovered that she sent most of her salary to Baltimore, where her 3 younger siblings were studying. The oldest was 16 and dreamed of engineering. The middle one, 14, wanted to be a teacher. The youngest, 12, had exceptional talent for mathematics. They all depended on Margaret to continue their studies. She had sacrificed not only for her own education, but for the future of her entire family. The following Monday, Richard called Margaret for a serious conversation in his home office. "Please have a seat," he said, pointing to the chair in front of his desk. "Have I done something wrong, sir?" she asked, visibly nervous. "On the contrary. Peter has never been so well cared for, but I need to understand some things." Richard opened the drawer and took out the investigation documents. "I know about your family in Baltimore. I know about the medical school you had to drop out of." Margaret turned pale. "You investigated me. I wanted to understand why a woman with your knowledge was working as a housekeeper. I need the work, sir. I have responsibilities." "How much were you sending to your family every month?" "Almost all of my salary. I keep just enough for my food and transportation." Richard paused, processing the information. Margaret earned $2,000 a month. If she sent almost everything to her family, she was living on at most $500. "Where do you live?" "In a rented room in Queens. I share it with 2 other young women." "And do you plan to go back to studying someday?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I dream of it every day, sir. But my siblings need to finish their studies first. Maybe when they graduate." "How long would that be?" "The oldest will take the college entrance exam next year. If all goes well, in about 6 years, they'll all be graduated." Richard calculated mentally. Margaret would be 35 when she could think about returning to school. In medicine, starting a residency at that age would be very difficult. What if I offered an alternative? "How do you mean, sir?" "What if I paid for your college, but you continued working here part-time?" Margaret shook her head vigorously. "I can't accept charity, sir. It's not right. It's not charity, it's an investment." "An investment in what?" Richard took a deep breath. The idea had come to him at that moment, but it was starting to make sense. Peter needs someone who understands him, not just a housekeeper or a nanny, but someone who can follow his development completely. You're already doing that naturally. "Sir, Let me finish. You would continue living here, caring for Peter, but also studying. In return, when you graduate, you would work as our family doctor for a few years. That doesn't make economic sense for you. It makes emotional sense. For the first time in 2 years, my son is happy. Margaret stayed silent for a long time, processing the proposal. What if I can't manage work and study? We'll adjust responsibilities as needed. The important thing is for Peter to continue receiving the care you provide. May I think about it? Of course. But I want you to know that I'm not doing this just out of kindness. I'm doing it because I've seen the impact you have on my son's life. That night, Richard called Helen, his ex-wife, to tell her about the discovery. I always knew there was something special about Margaret, Helen said. Peter talks about her with an affection he's never shown for anyone else. Do you think I'm right to offer this? I think you're finally being a real father. Helen's words echoed in Richard's head all night. Being a real father. He always thought providing financially was enough, but Peter needed so much more than that. On Tuesday, Margaret went to Richard's office. Sir, I've thought about your proposal. And? I accept, but with one condition. What? I want a contract that guarantees that if I don't manage to graduate, or if something goes wrong, I'll keep my job normally. I can't risk losing my work. I agree, but I have a condition too. What is it, sir? Stop calling me sir all the time. Richard is fine. Margaret smiled for the first time since he had found out about the otoscope. All right, Richard. In the following weeks, Richard reorganized the entire household dynamic. He hired a cleaning lady to come 3 times a week, freeing Margaret to focus on her studies and caring for Peter. He set up a small office in her room so she could study in peace. Peter was over the moon. His private teacher could now officially teach him everything he wanted to know about medicine. Daddy, when Aunt Margaret becomes a real doctor, will she be able to examine me without hiding the equipment? Peter asked during breakfast. Yes, she will, son. And will she keep living here? If she wants to. Peter hugged Richard tightly. You're the best daddy in the world. Richard felt an emotion he hadn't experienced in a long time. His son was genuinely happy, and he was part of it. Margaret started studying for the medical school entrance exam. Richard enrolled her in a preparatory course and bought all the necessary books. Every night after Peter went to sleep, she dedicated herself to studying with a determination that was impressive. Sometimes, Richard would find her asleep on her books at the kitchen table. On those occasions, he would cover her with a blanket and turn off the lights, leaving only the lamp on. One night, Peter came down to get some water and saw Margaret studying. Why do you study in the middle of the night, Aunt? He asked, rubbing his eyes. It's when I have the most quiet to concentrate. Can I study with you? It's too late for you, Peter. Children need to sleep well to grow. Then tomorrow, can I help you study? How would you help me? I can hold your flashcards. Richard watched the scene from the stairs, feeling his chest warm up. Peter had found a purpose in helping Margaret, and she had given him the feeling of being useful and important. 2 months later, Margaret took the medical school entrance exam for 3 private universities in New York. Richard paid the registration fees without her knowing. When the results came out, she had passed all 3. The conversation about which one to choose happened in the living room, with Peter actively participating. Which one is closest to home? Peter asked. St. Catherine's is 40 minutes away by subway, Margaret answered, checking the map. Then that one. That way you won't be away for too long. Richard smiled at his son's simple logic. Margaret, which one has the best program? They're all good, but St. Catherine's has a very strong pediatrics program. Then it's decided. On the first day of class, Peter insisted on accompanying Margaret to the university's door. Richard drove them, watching how nervous she was. Aunt Margaret, you're going to be the best doctor in the United States, Peter said, holding her hand. Thank you, Peter. That means a lot to me. When she got out of the car, Peter waved through the window until she disappeared into the crowd of students. Daddy, I'm proud of her, he said on the way back. Me too, son. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. The following months brought a routine that none of the 3 had experienced before. Margaret studied in the morning and took care of Peter in the afternoon. Richard rearranged his schedule to have dinner at home at least 4 times a week. The conversations during meals changed completely. Instead of basic questions about their day, They discussed scientific discoveries that Margaret was learning in college and that Peter absorbed with fascination. "Today, I learned about how the brain processes pain," Margaret shared during a Thursday dinner. "How does that work?" Peter asked, putting down his fork. "The brain doesn't feel pain by itself. It needs special messengers that alert it when something isn't right in the body." "Like pain mailmen," Peter laughed. "Exactly." Margaret laughed too. "You have a very good way of understanding things." Richard watched these interactions with a mix of admiration and guilt. Admiration at how Margaret naturally nurtured Peter's curiosity, and guilt at realizing how distant he had been from his own son for years. 3 months after Margaret started college, Peter fell ill again. This time, it was Margaret who insisted on taking him to the hospital. "The symptoms aren't normal," she told Richard. "Persistent fever, abdominal pain on the right side, nausea. He needs urgent medical evaluation." At the hospital, they discovered Peter had early appendicitis. The surgery was simple, but the doctor praised how quickly they had brought the boy in. "A few more hours and we would have had a complicated case," the surgeon said. "Whoever identified the symptoms was very competent." During Peter's recovery, Margaret hardly left his side. She monitored his vital signs, made sure he took his medications on time, and explained each step of the recovery process so the boy wouldn't feel afraid. "Aunt Margaret, when I grow up, I want to operate on people like the doctor did with me," Peter asked on the 3rd day of his hospital stay. "If that's what you really want, I'll help you study everything you need." "Promise." "I promise." Richard watched the promise being made and understood he was witnessing something far beyond a professional relationship. Margaret had become the maternal figure Peter needed, without ever trying to replace Helen. When Peter returned home, Richard noticed subtle changes in Margaret's behavior. She seemed more confident, more comfortable expressing opinions. College was giving back to her a part that had been lost years ago. "Richard, may I make a suggestion?" she said one Saturday morning. It was the first time she had taken the initiative in a conversation. "Of course. Peter has a natural talent for science. Maybe it would be interesting to enroll him in some extracurricular activities in that area." "What kind of activities?" "There's a program at the National Institute of Health Sciences where children can learn about biology in a hands-on way. Peter would love it." "You research this." "I research everything that could be good for him." Richard signed up immediately. Peter was overjoyed when he learned he would spend Saturdays learning about animals and plants at the institute. During the first visit to the National Institute of Health Sciences, Richard accompanied Peter and Margaret. He watched how she interacted with other parents, always modest about her knowledge, but offering valuable information when asked. One mother commented that her daughter was afraid of doctors. "That's normal," Margaret said gently. "Sometimes it helps to explain to the child what will happen before the appointment. Children are less afraid when they understand." "Do you work in healthcare?" "I'm studying medicine," Margaret replied, with a quiet pride that made Richard smile. On the way back home, Peter was thrilled with everything he had learned. "Daddy, did you know there are snakes that help make medicine?" "I didn't know that." "Aunt Margaret said that in college she's going to learn about that too." That night, Richard had a conversation with Margaret that would change the course of everything. "How are your siblings doing?" "Well, thank God. Michael got into engineering school." "And the other two?" "Lucas is doing well in school and Amanda won a regional math competition." "You must be proud." "I am, but also worried." "Why?" "Michael will need more money for college. Engineering materials are expensive and he'll need a computer." Richard realized that Margaret was always thinking of others, never of herself. "What if I offered Michael a job here in New York? My companies always need engineering interns." Margaret looked at him in disbelief. "You would do that?" "Under one condition." "What?" "That you stop worrying so much about money and focus on your studies. I want you to be the top student in your class." Margaret began to cry, but they were tears of relief and gratitude. "Why are you doing all this for us?" "Because you gave me back my son. Before you came, Peter barely spoke to me. Now he tells me about his dreams, his fears, his discoveries. That is priceless." Michael arrived in New York 2 weeks later, Richard put him to work in the projects department of one of the companies with a salary that allowed him to study comfortably. Having her brother nearby made Margaret even more motivated. Now she had family close by and could focus completely on her studies. Peter was fascinated to have another teacher at home. Michael explained physics and math concepts in a fun way, while Margaret continued with the biology and medicine lessons. "Our family is getting bigger," Peter commented during a Sunday lunch. "How so?" Richard asked. "Aunt Margaret, Michael, it's like you're my older siblings." Richard and Margaret exchanged glances. Somehow, they had truly become a non-traditional yet functional family. 6 months after Margaret started college, Peter had a severe allergic reaction after eating a cookie at school. The principal called in a panic, saying the boy was having trouble breathing. Margaret arrived at the school before the ambulance even got there. She administered first aid, gave him the allergy medicine Peter always carried, and calmed the boy until he could be taken to the hospital. "How did you know exactly what to do?" the principal asked. "I study medicine, and I know Peter's medical history well." At the hospital, the allergist praised the speed and precision of the first aid. "Whoever attended to the child initially prevented the situation from becoming serious," he told Richard. "It was Margaret." "Is she a doctor?" "She's in medical school. She has a natural talent." Peter was lucky. When they got home, Peter was tired but fine. He fell asleep on the couch during a movie, and Richard carried him to his room. "Margaret," he called when he returned to the living room. "Yes?" "Thank you for taking care of him as if he were your own son." "Peter is special to me, more than I can explain." "Why?" Margaret hesitated before answering. "I can never have children, Richard. A medical complication I discovered during college. Peter fills a space in my heart that I thought would always be empty." Richard felt a lump in his throat. He understood that Margaret's dedication to Peter came from a deep place of maternal love that she could never express biologically. "He's lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one to have both of you." The first year of college flew by. Margaret excelled in all her subjects, especially pediatrics. Her teachers noticed her natural ability with children and her exceptional dedication to her studies. Peter eagerly followed every exam every semester. They created a tradition where she would tell him the most interesting things she had learned each day. "Today I learned how bones heal when they break," Margaret shared one March afternoon. "Is it true they become stronger afterward?" Peter asked. "It's true. The body is incredible. It always tries to become more resilient." "Just like you, Aunt. You became stronger after your dream broke." The simplicity of Peter's observation moved Margaret deeply. Richard, who was working on his computer nearby, stopped to listen. "What do you mean, Peter? You lost your chance to become a doctor before, but you didn't give up. Now you're studying again, and you'll be an even better doctor." "You're right, little doctor." Richard realized that Peter, at 8 years old, had understood something about resilience that many adults take decades to grasp. In the second semester, Margaret began doing internships at the university hospital. Peter would get anxious waiting for her to return and tell him about the cases she had witnessed. "I took care of a boy your age today," she said one Thursday evening. "Was he very sick?" "He had pneumonia, but he'll be fine. What impressed me was how brave he was, just like you when you had to have surgery." "I wasn't brave. I was scared." Courage isn't about not being afraid, Peter. It's about doing what needs to be done even when you are scared. Richard noticed how Margaret always found ways to teach important values through her experiences. Peter was growing up not just with medical knowledge, but with a mature understanding of facing challenges. During Margaret's second year of college, Richard faced a significant financial crisis in one of his companies. A major project had gone wrong, and he needed to cut expenses drastically. One evening, he found Margaret studying in the kitchen and decided to be honest with her about the situation. "Things are tough at work," he said, sitting at the table. "Do you want to talk about it? I might have to reduce some expenses for a while." Margaret immediately understood the implication. "Do you want me to start paying for my own college again?" "I don't want to, but it might be necessary." "It's okay, I understand." "Margaret, You don't need to justify yourself, Richard. You've already done more for me than anyone else in my life. That night, Richard heard Margaret crying in her room. It wasn't a loud cry, but a restrained sob from someone trying to be strong. He stayed awake all night, thinking of solutions. He couldn't let Margaret drop out of college again, not after seeing the progress she had made and the impact on Peter's life. The next morning, he made a radical decision. He sold his imported car and bought a simpler domestic one. He cancelled his private gym membership and joined a public one. He cut personal expenses he had considered essential. "What are you doing?" Margaret asked when she learned about the changes. "Priorities," he replied simply. "Richard, don't do this because of me. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for Peter, and for me too." "What do you mean?" "You've changed our family for the better. That's worth any financial sacrifice." Peter, who was listening to the conversation from the doorway, ran to hug his father. "Daddy, you're brave too, just like Aunt Margaret said." The financial crisis lasted 6 months, but it strengthened their bonds even more. Richard discovered he needed much less luxury than he had imagined, and Margaret dedicated herself even more to her studies, determined not to disappoint the trust they had placed in her. Michael, who had now been working at the company for a year, proved to be an exceptional employee. His innovative ideas helped Richard recover some of the losses faster than expected. "Your family has a talent for solving problems," Richard said to Margaret one Saturday afternoon. "We learned that complaining about difficulties doesn't help. It's better to focus on finding solutions." "Where did you learn that?" "From my father. Even after the accident, he never complained. He always said that every difficult day prepares us to be stronger for the next one." Richard began to understand where Margaret's strength came from. She had been raised with a life philosophy that turned obstacles into opportunities for growth. In her 3rd year of college, Margaret had to choose a specialization to focus on. Unsurprisingly, she chose pediatrics. But what surprised Richard was the proposal she made. "I want to write my thesis on the emotional development of children in non-traditional families." "What kind of families?" "Like ours, where the caregiving figures aren't necessarily the biological parents." "You want to study our family?" "I want to study how Peter has developed emotionally over the past 3 years, with your permission." "And what would your hypothesis be?" "That children develop better when they have multiple caregiving figures who offer different types of emotional and intellectual support." Richard was intrigued by the scientific perspective Margaret brought to something he had lived intuitively. Would Peter agree to participate? He would be honored to help Aunt Margaret with real research. The thesis project brought a new dimension to the relationship among the 3 of them. Peter felt important for contributing to scientific work, while Richard found himself reflecting on his own evolution as a father. Margaret interviewed both of them separately, asking questions about how they perceived the changes in family dynamics over the years. "How did you feel before Margaret arrived?" she asked Peter during one of the interviews. "Sad. Daddy was always working, and I had no one to talk to about the things that interested me. And now? Now I know there's always someone who cares about me. And Daddy has changed too. He asks me about my dreams now." When Margaret interviewed Richard, the questions were equally revealing. "How would you describe your relationship with Peter before and after my arrival?" "Before, I thought being a father meant only providing and protecting. Afterward, I understood it means truly being present, interested in the person he is becoming." "Do you attribute this change only to my presence?" "I attribute it to the example you set. You showed me how it's possible to genuinely dedicate yourself to someone without expecting anything in return." While developing the research, Margaret discovered surprising things about the impact of her presence on the family. Peter had improved significantly in school, not just in science but in all subjects. His relationships with classmates had become healthier, and he showed higher levels of confidence and self-esteem. Richard had also changed. Company reports showed that his productivity had increased over the past 2 years, contrary to the logic that spending more time at home would harm work. "How do you explain this?" Richard asked when she shared the preliminary results. "When we feel emotionally stable at home, we carry that stability into other aspects of life. You became a more present father, which made you more at peace. That peacefulness reflects in your work. And Peter? Peter gained emotional security. Secure children learn better, relate better, dream bigger. Margaret's thesis received the highest grade and was selected for presentation at a pediatrics conference. Peter insisted on accompanying her to the presentation. "I want to see Aunt Margaret being famous," he said. Richard organized his schedule to be there too. Seeing Margaret present her research to experienced doctors was a moment of pride he hadn't expected to feel. During the presentation, a renowned pediatrician asked a challenging question about the research methodology. Margaret answered with confidence and precision, demonstrating complete mastery of the subject. "Impressive work," the doctor said after the presentation. "Do you have plans for residency? I want to focus on pediatrics. With this research, you'll certainly get a good placement." On the way back home, Peter was beaming. "Aunt Margaret, everyone praised you. It was a team effort. You two were essential for me to complete this research." "How so?" Richard asked. "Richard, you gave me the opportunity and stability I needed. Peter gave me the most interesting study subject I could have." That evening, Peter asked a question that surprised both adults. "Aunt Margaret, when you become a real doctor, will you leave here?" "Why do you think I would leave?" "Because doctors work in hospitals, not in homes." Richard realized Peter's question touched on something he himself had been avoiding thinking about. What would happen when Margaret graduated? "Peter, no matter where I work, you will always be special to me," Margaret said. "But won't you live here anymore?" Margaret looked at Richard, seeking guidance on how to respond. "We'll figure that out when the time comes," Richard said. "There's still plenty of time." But Peter's question planted a seed of worry in Richard. He had grown so accustomed to Margaret's presence that he couldn't imagine the house without her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. During the 4th year of college, Margaret began doing supervised shifts at the hospital. Peter would get anxious on nights when she didn't come home, but understood it was part of her training. Richard hired a babysitter for her shift nights, but Peter always complained it wasn't the same. "Jessica is nice, but she doesn't know how to answer my questions about medicine," he said one Sunday morning. "Not everyone needs to know about medicine, Peter, but I like learning about it." "Why?" "Because I want to help people like Aunt Margaret does." Richard realized Peter had found his calling at 10 years old, directly inspired by Margaret's example. One day, Peter came home from school visibly upset. "What happened?" Margaret asked, always attentive to his moods. "The science teacher said I know too much for my age, that maybe I should focus on other subjects." "And what do you think about that?" "I think he doesn't like when I ask questions he can't answer." Richard intervened in the conversation. "Peter, you should never feel bad for knowing too much or for being curious. Those are valuable qualities. But the other boys in class think I'm weird." Margaret knelt down to Peter's level. "When I was in college, some classmates also thought I was weird for studying so much. But you know what I learned?" "What?" "That people who think you're weird for wanting to learn are people who have stopped dreaming. Don't let them make you stop too. Promise you'll never stop teaching me things. I promise I'll always answer your questions, even if I need to research to give the right answer." That evening, Richard had a serious conversation with Helen about Peter's school. "Maybe it's time to think about a school that challenges him more," Helen suggested. "A private one? Or a public one with a focus on sciences? There are some options in New York." Richard researched and discovered a school specialized in students with specific talents. Peter took an aptitude test and was accepted immediately. The school change was transformative. Peter finally found classmates who shared his interest in sciences and teachers prepared for advanced students. "Today we did an experiment on liquid density," he excitedly reported on the first day. "And how was it?" Margaret asked. "I managed to explain to my classmates why oil and water don't mix. They were impressed." Richard observed how Peter was becoming more confident and sociable. The school change, combined with the emotional support he received at home, was allowing him to fully explore his potential. During a parent meeting at the new school, the educational coordinator called Richard for a private conversation. Peter is an exceptional child, she said. In what sense? He has scientific knowledge well beyond his age, but he also demonstrates rare emotional maturity. How do you work on that at home? Richard explained about Margaret and her medical background. Ah, that explains a lot. Peter has a solid foundation both intellectually and emotionally. It's a powerful combination. Do you have any suggestions for his development? Just keep doing exactly what you're doing. Peter is flourishing. When Richard told Margaret about the conversation, she was visibly moved. Sometimes I'm afraid I'm influencing his choices too much. Why would you be afraid of that? What if he's interested in medicine only because I'm the one teaching it? What if it's pressure instead of a true calling? Have you asked him that? No. Then ask him. Margaret had the conversation with Peter the following evening, during a quiet moment before bedtime. Peter, can I ask you a serious question? Of course, Aunt Margaret. Do you want to be a doctor because I teach about it, or because you really like the subject? Peter thought for a moment, with the seriousness he always showed when reflecting on something important. I like learning about medicine because you teach it, but I want to be a doctor because I want to help children who are sad or scared, like you helped me when I had to have surgery. Are you sure? Yes, but if you weren't here to teach, I'd still want to learn. It would just be harder. Peter's answer reassured Margaret. Her influence had guided, but not artificially created, his interest. In her 5th year of medical school, Margaret began doing rotations in different specialties to complete her training. Peter followed each experience with genuine interest. Today I was in the emergency department, she shared one Tuesday afternoon. Was it different from pediatrics? Very different. It's faster, more intense, but I learned important things about how to act in urgent situations. Did you like it? I like learning, but it confirmed that pediatrics is really what I want to do. Richard noticed that Margaret was becoming a well-rounded doctor, not just focused on one area. This would make her even better prepared to care for Peter and eventually other children. During a Sunday afternoon, Peter asked a question that changed everyone's perspective on the future. Daddy, when Aunt Margaret becomes a doctor, can we open a small hospital here at home? What do you mean, son? A place where children can come when they're sick, but that isn't scary like a big hospital. Richard and Margaret looked at each other. Peter's idea was innocent, but it had an interesting core. Would you like to have a practice at home, Margaret? It would be a dream to be able to treat children in a more welcoming environment. And would it be feasible? Technically, yes. Many pediatricians have home practices, but it would be a big investment to start. Richard began researching the feasibility of converting part of the house into a pediatric practice. The idea excited him more with each discovery. The garage could be converted into 2 exam rooms, one for regular checkups and another for minor procedures. The sunroom could become a cozy waiting area for the children. When he presented the complete idea to Margaret, she was speechless. Are you serious? Completely. It would be a way for you to start your career without having to leave home immediately. Peter could be closely involved, and you two could continue with this routine that works so well. But the costs? Leave the costs to me. I can do this as an initial investment, and you can pay me back as the practice starts to generate returns. Richard, I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it carefully. Peter, who had overheard part of the conversation, came running into the room. Are we going to have a real hospital at home? It would be a clinic, not a hospital, Margaret explained. But would it be your clinic? It would. So can I be your assistant? Margaret laughed, hugging the boy. We'll see how you behave until then, Dr. Peter. During the following weeks, Richard worked with an architect to design the renovation. Peter participated in all the meetings, giving suggestions on how to make the space more child-friendly. Can the walls have animal drawings? Would he asked. Of course, the architect replied. What kind of animals do you think children would like? Butterflies, because they're pretty and not scary. And maybe some superheroes, the architect suggested. No, Peter shook his head. Superheroes are made up. I want real things like animals that actually exist. Richard was impressed with Peter's logic. Even at 10 years old, he preferred reality to fantasy. The renovation began during the school holidays. Peter watched every step with fascination, while Margaret prepared for graduation and the residency exam. "Aunt Margaret, are you nervous for the residency exam?" Peter asked one afternoon as they watched the construction workers. "A little. It's a very important exam. But you're the best student in the class. You'll pass." "How do you know I'm the best student?" "Because you study more than everyone else and care more about the patients. That's what makes a good doctor, right?" Margaret hugged Peter, feeling renewed confidence. If a 10-year-old could see her qualities so clearly, maybe she really was ready to be a good doctor. On the day of the residency exam, the whole family was nervous. Richard cancelled appointments to stay home with Peter, and Michael came for lunch to offer moral support. "She'll pass," Peter said with conviction during lunch. "How are you so sure?" Michael asked. "Because she never gives up on anything, and when someone never gives up, they always get what they want." In the afternoon, when Margaret returned from the exam, she found a sign that Peter had made. "Congratulations, Dr. Margaret." She laughed and cried at the same time. "I still don't know if I passed, Peter." "I know. You passed." 3 weeks later, the results came out. Margaret had achieved first place in the pediatrics residency at Johns Hopkins Hospital. Peter celebrated as if he had won the lottery. "I knew it! I knew it!" he shouted, jumping around the room. Richard felt a mix of pride and apprehension. The residency would mean that Margaret would have to spend even more time away from home. "How will it work now?" he asked her later. "The residency is full-time, but I can negotiate some hours, and the clinic here can operate on weekends. And Peter will have to learn to share my attention with other patients. It will be good for him too." During Margaret's graduation, the whole family was present. Michael had brought the other 2 siblings from Baltimore, Lucas and Amanda. Richard organized a small party at home to celebrate. "Speech! Speech!" Peter shouted when everyone was gathered in the room. Margaret stood on a chair holding her diploma in her hands. "When I was little, I used to play doctor with my dolls. I never imagined it would take so long to truly realize that dream." She looked at Peter. "Peter, you helped me remember why I wanted to be a doctor. Children deserve someone who understands them and truly cares about them." Then she looked at Richard. "Richard, you gave me something money can't buy. You believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself anymore." "And now?" Michael asked. "Now we're going to build the best pediatric practice on the Upper West Side of New York," she said, raising her diploma. Everyone applauded, but Richard noticed tears in Margaret's eyes. They were tears of joy, but also of a kind of emotional exhaustion that comes when you achieve a goal you fought for so long. Margaret's residency began in March. The first months were intense, with 36-hour shifts and a study load she hadn't experienced since her college entrance exams. Peter adapted to the new routine more easily than Richard expected. He understood that Margaret was learning to be the best doctor possible and felt proud when she told him about the cases she had followed. "Today, I helped care for a baby who was born prematurely," she shared one Friday evening. "Is he okay?" Peter asked worriedly. "He is. Babies are stronger than we imagine." "Just like you," Peter said simply. Richard observed that Peter had developed impressive emotional maturity. At 10 years old, he could understand and support Margaret's professional challenges in a way many adults couldn't. The practice was completed during the first year of Margaret's residency. Richard had invested in top-notch equipment and created an environment that felt more like a medical dollhouse than a traditional clinic. "It's perfect," Margaret said on the day of the informal opening. "Do you really like it?" Peter asked eagerly. "I love it. It's exactly how I dreamed my practice would be." "And can I help when you see patients?" "You can, but only if the children's parents allow it, and you'll have to learn some important rules about how to behave during appointments." Peter took Margaret's instructions very seriously. She taught him about medical confidentiality, respect for patients, and how to be helpful without getting in the way. The practice's first patient was a 6-year-old girl who had recently moved to the neighborhood. Her parents sought out Margaret because they heard there was a pediatrician in the area. "Dr. Margaret, Sophia has been afraid of doctors ever since she needed a vaccine," the mother explained. "I understand. Sophia, "Would you like to meet my special assistant?" Margaret asked the shy girl. Peter approached with a gentle smile. "Hi, Sophia. I'm Peter. You don't need to be afraid of Dr. Margaret. She's really nice and never hurts anyone." "Are you a doctor too?" the girl asked. "Not yet, but Dr. Margaret is teaching me. Do you want to see how the stethoscope works?" The interaction between Peter and the girl completely calmed the atmosphere. Sophia allowed Margaret to perform the examination without any protest. "How do you do that?" the mother asked, impressed. "Peter has a natural gift for calming other children. He understands what it's like to be in their shoes." After the appointment, Richard talked to Margaret about the dynamic he had observed. "Peter really has a talent for this." "He does, and most importantly, he does it out of genuine love, not to impress." "Do you think he should pursue medicine?" "I think he should follow any path that allows him to help people. It could be medicine, psychology, nursing, or anything related to care." "But would you like him to pursue medicine?" "I would like him to be happy. If medicine makes him happy, great. If he discovers another passion, I'll support him just the same." Richard realized that Margaret had become the kind of adult Peter needed as a role model, someone who supported his dreams without projecting her own expectations onto him. During the second year of residency, Margaret began receiving job offers. Private hospitals wanted to hire her because of her excellent evaluations and the way she connected with pediatric patients. A clinic in Beverly Hills offered a salary 3 times higher than what I earn in residency, she told Richard one Thursday evening. "And do you want to accept it? Financially, it would be great. I could finally help my siblings more significantly. But it would mean leaving the residency halfway, and it would completely change our dynamic here." "What does Peter think?" "I haven't told him yet. I don't want him to feel responsible for my decision." Richard thought carefully before responding. "Margaret, you spent 6 years rebuilding your medical career. Don't make a decision based solely on money." "But my siblings. Michael is doing well here. Lucas got a full scholarship for engineering too. Amanda received a scholarship to a private school because of her math competitions. Everyone is on track." "How do you know all this?" "Because I care about your family. They are extensions of you, and you've become part of our family." Margaret fell silent, processing his words. "Are you saying I should refuse the offer?" "I'm saying make the decision that will make you happiest 10 years from now, not 10 months from now." That night, Margaret had a long phone conversation with her father. Richard didn't hear the details, but he could hear the calm and caring tone of his voice in the background. The next morning, she appeared at breakfast with a lighter expression. "I decided to continue the residency," she announced. "That's great," Peter exclaimed. "And after residency, I want to focus on the practice here, serving the local community, doing work that really makes a difference." "Are you sure?" Richard asked. "Absolutely. Money is important, but purpose is fundamental." Peter got up from his chair and hugged Margaret. "Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for letting me be part of your family." In the last year of residency, Margaret began specializing even more in her practice. She developed specific protocols for children with medical anxiety, created playful educational materials, and established partnerships with local schools. Peter, now 12 years old, had officially become her junior assistant. He helped organize materials, calm younger children, and even learned to perform some basic procedures like measuring height and weight. "Dr. Margaret, can Peter be my doctor too?" a 5-year-old girl asked during an appointment. "Peter is still learning, but when he grows up and studies hard, maybe yes. I'll wait," the girl said seriously. After the appointment, Richard talked with Margaret about the impact Peter was having on other patients. "He really has a vocation for this." "He does, but most importantly, he learned to care for people genuinely, not just technically." "Where did he learn that?" "From me, from you, from the experience of being cared for with love." Richard understood that Peter was becoming a reflection of the values they had all built together over the years. During Margaret's residency graduation, Peter made sure to be present with a bouquet of flowers he had chosen himself. "Dr. Margaret," he said solemnly, handing her the flowers, "now you're a real doctor." "And you're my real assistant," she replied, hugging him. "Forever, forever." Richard watched the scene with deep contentment. His non-traditional family had become the closest-knit family he knew. After graduation, Margaret officially opened her practice. The local community responded enthusiastically. In no time, she had a full schedule and a waiting list. What set them apart wasn't just Margaret's medical knowledge, but the way she and Peter welcomed families. Children who entered the office crying would leave smiling and asking when they could come back. "How do you do this?" a mother asked after an appointment. "We treat every child as if they're unique and special," Margaret replied. "And how does Peter help?" "Peter understands what it's like to be a child better than any adult. He translates what I say into language they understand." "You're a perfect team." During a Saturday afternoon, 6 months after the official opening of the practice, Richard found Margaret and Peter organizing medications and supplies for the following week. "How do you feel about everything that's happened?" he asked. "I feel like I've found my place in the world," Margaret replied. "And you, Peter?" "I feel like our family is special. We help each other and help other people too. And the future? What do you imagine a few years from now?" Margaret and Peter looked at each other, smiling. "Peter is going to study medicine at the best university in the country," Margaret said. "And Aunt Margaret is going to have the most famous practice in New York," Peter added. "And me," Richard joked. "You're going to be the proudest grandpa when I graduate," Peter said, running to hug him. "Grandpa?" Richard laughed. "When I get married and have children, you'll be like a grandpa, and Dr. Margaret will be like a grandma. Our family will get even bigger." Richard looked at Margaret, who was smiling with tears in her eyes. "Sounds like a perfect plan," he said. That night, after Peter fell asleep, Richard and Margaret had a conversation in the garden of the house. "You saved our family," he said. "You saved my life," she replied. "What do you mean?" "Richard, when I arrived here, I had lost hope. I thought my life would always be about working to support others without ever achieving my own dreams. And now I know it's possible to care for the people we love and still pursue our goals. Peter taught me that dreaming isn't selfishness." "Peter taught you that?" "One day he asked me why I didn't try to go back to studying medicine. When I explained about responsibilities, he said something that changed everything." "What did he say?" "That if I became a doctor, I could help more people beyond our family. That my dreams mattered too." Richard smiled. Peter had learned about generosity by watching Margaret, but he had also taught her about balancing care for others with care for herself. "And now that you're a certified doctor, what else do you want?" "I want to expand the practice. Maybe hire another pediatrician in the future. Create a truly special pediatric center." "Focused on what?" "On children who need medical and emotional care. Children from families in difficult situations like I was once. And Peter. Peter will grow up seeing that it's possible to use knowledge and privilege to help those in need. That's the best education I can give him." Richard understood that Margaret hadn't just achieved her personal dream. She had found a way to transform her own experience of hardship into a tool to help others. 2 years later, the practice had expanded to include a child psychologist and a nutritionist specialized in children. Peter, now 14, continued to be the special assistant, but had also found other passions. "Daddy, I want to study guitar," he announced one Sunday afternoon. "Why?" Richard asked, curious about the change of interest. "Dr. Margaret said that music can also help sick children feel better. I want to learn to play at the practice." Margaret smiled proudly. "Peter is understanding that there are many ways to care for people. And you agree with the guitar?" "I agree. Medicine isn't just about medicine and exams. It's also about comforting, distracting, bringing joy." Peter started guitar lessons, and within a few months was already playing simple songs for the younger patients. The practice gained an even better reputation in the community. "It's the place where children want to come back to," one mother commented to her friend in the waiting room. "My daughter said she wants to be a doctor just like Dr. Margaret when she grows up," another replied. Richard heard these comments with a pride that went beyond the personal. They had created something that positively impacted many families. During a routine checkup, Peter made an observation that surprised everyone. "Dr. Margaret, I noticed that you always ask the children how they feel before examining them." Why? Other doctors I've been to only asked about symptoms. You ask about feelings too. And why do you think I do that? Because you know that sometimes children get sick in their body because of things that are happening in their heart. Margaret stopped what she was doing and looked at Peter with admiration. Peter, you just described one of the most important concepts in modern medicine. Which one? Integrative medicine. Caring for the whole person, not just the disease. Richard, who was observing from the doorway, realized that Peter had absorbed much more than technical knowledge. He had understood the philosophy behind medical care. At 15, Peter began giving lectures in schools about basic first aid. Margaret accompanied him as a supervisor, but he conducted the presentations alone. How did you come up with this idea? A principal asked after one of the lectures. Peter suggested it, Margaret replied. He said if more children knew the basics of first aid, they could help in emergency situations until adults arrived. And does it work? The children love it. It's like turning health education into an educational game. Peter became a minor celebrity in the local schools. Children recognized him on the street as the boy who teaches about medicine. Doesn't it bother you to be famous? Richard joked with him. It's not about being famous, Daddy. It's about being useful. Aunt Margaret taught me that knowledge is only worthwhile when we share it. During the practice's third year, Margaret received a proposal to write a book on emotional pediatrics. A publisher had heard about her work and wanted to document her methods. You should accept, Richard said when she told him about the proposal. I don't know if I have enough experience to write a book. Margaret, you have 8 years of practical experience caring for Peter, 3 years of running a practice, and a unique way of approaching pediatrics. Of course you have experience. What if no one reads it? What if every pediatrician in the United States reads it and learns from you? Peter, who was listening, gave his typically straightforward opinion. Aunt Margaret, are you going to write a book about how to care for children? Maybe. Then write it. That way other doctors will learn to be nice like you. The simplicity of Peter's logic convinced Margaret. She agreed to write the book, using her experiences at the practice and especially her journey with Peter as a foundation. The writing process brought deep reflections for the whole family. Margaret interviewed Richard and Peter extensively, documenting how the family dynamics had evolved and impacted everyone's emotional development. What was the most significant moment for you? She asked Richard during one of the interviews. The day I found you examining Peter for the first time. That's when I understood I had misjudged many things in my life. How so? I thought medical knowledge only came from people who finished college. You showed me that knowledge comes from curiosity, dedication, and genuine care. And did that change how you see other people? It changed how I see everything. I stopped underestimating people because of their social position. I started valuing competence and character over titles. The interview with Peter was even more revealing. How would you describe our family to someone who doesn't know us? Margaret asked. We're a family that chose each other. Daddy chose me to be his son. You chose us to be your family. And I chose both of you to be the most important people in my life. And what makes our family special? We don't give up on each other. When someone's struggling, the others help. When someone has a dream, everyone supports them. Would you change anything? Change? Peter thought for a moment. Just one thing. What? I wish the story had started earlier. I wish you'd come into our lives when I was a baby, to have more time with you. Margaret got so emotional she had to pause the interview recording. The book, Heartfelt Pediatrics, Caring for Children with Science and Love, was published 8 months later and became a reference in the field. Margaret started getting invited to medical conferences and universities to speak about her approach. Peter, now 16, accompanied her to some lectures as an assistant. His presence demonstrated in practice the results of the methodology Margaret preached. You're a living example of how medicine can transform families, a Harvard Medical School professor said after one lecture. And how families can transform medical practice, Margaret replied. During a family conversation one December evening, Peter made an important revelation. Daddy, Aunt Margaret, I need to tell you something. What is it? Richard asked, noticing his serious tone. "I've decided I really want to study medicine. Not because of you, but for myself. I want to be a pediatrician like Aunt Margaret." "Are you sure?" Margaret asked. "Absolutely. These years at the clinic have shown me this is my true calling. And if you change your mind during high school, then we change plans, but I don't think I will. I feel the same passion I see in your eyes when you talk about medicine." Richard watched Margaret get emotional. After so many years caring for and teaching Peter, seeing him consciously choose to follow in her footsteps was the greatest validation that she'd done everything right. 6 months before Peter's college entrance exams, the family faced their first big test since they'd formed. Margaret received an offer to head the pediatrics department at a very prestigious private hospital. "It's a unique opportunity," she said during a family meeting that included Michael, who was now a graduated engineer and minority partner in one of Richard's companies. "But would it mean leaving the clinic?" Peter asked worriedly. "Not necessarily. I could keep the clinic and work at the hospital too. It would be a lot of work, but it would be a way to impact even more children." "And would you have time to help me study for my exams?" Peter asked, revealing his real concern. "Peter, you don't need my help studying anymore. You already know more basic medicine than many college freshmen." "But you always helped me, and I always will. But now you can help other people too." "How?" "How about becoming a biology tutor at your school?" The idea excited Peter immediately. He became a volunteer tutor, helping classmates who struggled with science. He discovered that teaching was as rewarding as learning. "Now I understand why you like teaching me so much," he told Margaret one afternoon. "Why?" "Because when you teach someone, you learn too. And when the person understands, you get as happy as if you'd learned it yourself." "Exactly, and that's just the beginning. In medicine, you'll teach patients about their own bodies, teach parents how to care for their children, teach other doctors about your discoveries." Peter began to see medicine not just as a way to heal, but as a way to educate and empower people. On the day of the medical school entrance exam, the whole family was nervous. Peter had prepared intensively, but the competition was fierce. "Take a deep breath and trust what you know," Margaret said before he went in for the test. "And remember why you want to study medicine," Richard added. "To be like both of you, someone who takes care of people," Peter replied, entering the exam room. 3 hours later, he came out smiling. "How was it?" Margaret asked anxiously. "Difficult, but I managed to answer everything. There was even a question about childhood emotional development that I knew because of your book." "Really? Really?" The first thing I thought was, Aunt Margaret taught me that. The exam results came out in January. Peter had been accepted into medical school at Columbia University, the same university where Margaret had dreamed of studying when she was younger. The celebration was emotional. The whole family was gathered. Richard, Margaret, Peter, Michael, Lucas, and Amanda, who were now all either in college or graduates. "A toast," Richard raised his glass. "To the family we chose and the dreams we pursued together. To Margaret, who never gave up," Michael said. "To Richard, who believed in all of us," Lucas added. "To Peter, who is going to be the best doctor in the United States," Amanda finished. "And to all of us, for proving that family isn't just about blood but about care," Peter concluded. During Peter's first year of college, he often called Margaret with questions about his classes, but the conversations always evolved into reflections about medical practice. "Aunt Margaret, today the professor talked about medical ethics. And what did you think?" "I remembered you always telling me that the most important thing is what's best for the patient, not what's easiest for the doctor. You really paid attention all those years. How could I not? You lived it every day, not just talked about it." Richard watched these conversations with deep satisfaction. Peter had internalized not just technical knowledge, but fundamental values about how to be a good professional and a good person. During Peter's second year of college, Margaret made an important decision. She decided to accept the hospital's offer, but with specific conditions. "I'll work at the hospital 3 days a week and keep the practice open the other 2 days," she announced. "And will you be able to handle all that?" Richard asked worriedly. "I will. Peter doesn't need constant supervision anymore. The practice is established and the hospital offers me research opportunities I've always wanted." "Research about what?" developing pediatric care protocols based on emotional support. So, you're going to teach other doctors to do what you do naturally? Exactly. Peter was proud of Margaret's new position, but also a little nostalgic. I miss when it was just the three of us all the time, he confessed one evening. Me too, Margaret said. But look at everything we've managed to build together. The practice sees over 200 children a month. You're becoming a doctor. Your father has become a more socially conscious businessman. How so? Peter asked. Richard explained how he had changed his company's policies after getting to know Margaret's story better. Now we offer scholarships for employees' children. We have a medical support program for families in need, and we hire people for their talent, not their diploma. Was that Aunt Margaret's influence? She showed me that talent and character exist in places I had never looked before. During Peter's 4th year of college, he began interning at Margaret's practice as a medical student, no longer just as an assistant. How does it feel to be officially supervised by someone you taught? Richard joked with Margaret. Proud, and a little nervous too. Why? Because now I need to be even more careful. Peter is watching me with the eyes of a doctor in training, not a curious child anymore. And does that bother you? On the contrary, it motivates me to be even better. Peter noticed the change in the dynamic too. Aunt Margaret, you're more demanding with me now, because now you need to learn not only what to do, but also what not to do. A doctor's responsibility is very great. I understand, but sometimes I miss when you used to teach me for fun. Peter, Margaret stopped what she was doing. Never stop seeing medicine as something fascinating. The day it becomes just a job, you've lost the essence of being a doctor. How do you keep that passion after so many years? By remembering why I started. Children deserve special care, and everyone who leaves here feeling better reminds me why it's worth it. In his last year of college, Peter began to develop his own area of interest within pediatrics, children's preventive medicine. I want to focus on teaching families to prevent diseases instead of just treating them, he said to Margaret. Interesting. What led you to this specialization? I noticed that many children we see at the clinic could have avoided problems with proper information for the parents. And how do you plan to work on this? I want to create educational programs for schools and communities, teach about healthy eating, exercise, hygiene, first aid. Margaret was impressed with the maturity of Peter's proposal. It's an underserved and very important area. I learned by watching you that medicine doesn't just happen in the clinic. It happens in education, in prevention, in the community. Richard observed that Peter had developed an even broader view of medicine than Margaret. He wanted to impact children's health before they even needed treatment. During Peter's medical school graduation, 10 years after Margaret had returned to her studies, the emotion in the family was indescribable. Dr. Peter Thompson, the dean announced when it was his turn to receive the diploma. Margaret cried openly. Richard felt a pride that went beyond any professional success he had ever achieved. Dr. Margaret, Peter said during the speech he gave at the graduation, you taught me that medicine is about healing bodies, but also about healing lives. Thank you for healing ours. After graduation, Peter was accepted for a residency in pediatrics at the same hospital where Margaret was now head of the department. But he made a point of making it clear that he didn't want special treatment. I want to be evaluated on my own merits, he said. You will be, Margaret assured. In fact, I'm going to be even more demanding with you than with the other residents. Why? Because I know what you're capable of. During Peter's first year of residency, Margaret watched with pride as he stood out not only technically, but in how he related to patients and families. He has a natural ability to calm anxious parents, a veteran doctor commented. How did he learn that? Margaret asked, pretending not to know. Seems like he grew up watching a good example. One day, Peter treated an 8-year-old boy who had arrived at the hospital with an extreme fear of doctors. The boy refused to cooperate with any procedure. Can I try? Peter asked the attending physician. He approached the boy at eye level. Hi, my name is Peter. I'm a doctor too, but I'm still learning. Do you want to help me learn how to take care of you? The strategy worked perfectly. The boy felt important for helping Peter learn and cooperated with all the exams. Margaret watched the scene from afar, feeling an emotion that mixed maternal pride and professional admiration. "Where did he learn that approach?" the veteran doctor asked. "By observing what it's like to be cared for with love," Margaret replied simply. That evening she called Richard to share what she had witnessed. "Peter made his first real connection with a patient today. How was it?" "Perfect. He used exactly the same strategies I used with him when he was little. So the circle is complete." "In a way, yes. Peter can now pass on to other children the care he received. And how do you feel about that?" "I feel like I've fulfilled my mission. Peter didn't just need a housekeeper or a babysitter. He needed someone who would prepare him to be the best version of himself." During the second year of his residency, Peter began working on his special preventive medicine project. He created a pilot program in 5 schools in the region, teaching children about basic health care. "How are you structuring the program?" Margaret asked during a Sunday lunch. "Monthly 1-hour classes, focused on practical topics. How to brush teeth properly, why it's important to wash hands, what to do if someone gets hurt during recess." "And are the children responding well?" "They love it, especially because I let them practice on each other with supervision. Examples? I teach them how to take temperature, how to apply a bandage, how to check if someone is breathing well." Richard was impressed with Peter's methodology. "Where did you learn teaching techniques?" "By watching Aunt Margaret teach me and remembering how I enjoyed learning when I was little." Peter's program gained recognition from the City Hall. He was invited to expand it to other schools in the city. "Dr. Peter, your approach is significantly reducing household accidents among children in the region," a coordinator from the Department of Health said. "How did you measure that?" "Fewer children arriving at the emergency room with injuries that could have been prevented or initially treated at home. That means they're applying what they learn." "Exactly. And more importantly, they're teaching their siblings and friends." Peter was multiplying the impact of his education exponentially. During the last year of his residency, Peter made a decision that surprised the family. "I want to do a second residency in family and community medicine," he announced. "Why?" Richard asked. "Because I want to work on prevention, not just with children, but with entire families. I want to understand how a child's health connects with the emotional health of the whole family." Margaret was impressed with the evolution of Peter's medical thinking. "It's a very advanced approach. I learned by observing our family. When you took care of me, you automatically took care of Daddy too. When Daddy became more present, it improved my emotional health. Everything is connected." "You want to be the kind of doctor who treats families, not just individual patients?" "Exactly." Richard understood that Peter had developed a vision of medicine that went far beyond what any university could teach. He had learned about human interconnection by living in a family that took care of each other. 2 years later, Dr. Peter Thompson became the youngest family doctor to open a community clinic in New York. The practice had expanded to include care for entire families, not just children. "How do you structure family care?" a journalist asked during an interview about the new clinic model. "We see each family as a connected system. When a child is sick, we also investigate the emotional health of the parents. When an adult is stressed, we observe how that affects the children." "And does it work?" "Our results show that families treated holistically have lower rates of recurrence and higher satisfaction with treatment." Margaret watched the interview on television, seated beside Richard in the room where everything had begun 15 years earlier. "He exceeded all our expectations," she said. "Our son has become extraordinary," Richard replied, referring to Peter as "our son" for the first time. "Ours indeed," Margaret agreed, smiling. Peter arrived home after the interview and found them still in the room. "Did you see it on TV?" "We did," Richard said. "We're proud. Do you know what makes me proudest?" Peter sat between them. "That our story proved family is about choice. Daddy chose to care for me better. Aunt Margaret chose to turn dreams into reality. I chose to follow your example." "And now?" Margaret asked. "Now I'll spend the rest of my life proving that all the trust you placed in me was worth it." "Peter," Richard said solemnly, The only thing we hope for is that you're happy. I am happy, Daddy. Every day I wake up knowing I can make a difference in someone's life. That's what you taught me real success means. That night, the three of them stayed up late talking about plans for the future. The community clinic could become a model for other cities. Peter wanted to create a training program for family doctors. Margaret dreamed of writing more books about humanized pediatrics. Do you realize our story could inspire other families? Richard said. How so? Peter asked. We showed that people from different backgrounds can come together and grow together. That talent exists in unexpected places, that dreams can be shared and achieved as a team. Like a chosen family? Peter smiled. Exactly. Margaret had an idea. What if we wrote a book together, not about medicine, but about how to form families based on mutual care? Who would read that? Richard asked. Single parents, people who work with children, families in formation, anyone who wants to understand how to create true bonds. Peter got excited about the idea. Would each of us write a part? I'd write about the medical perspective of family development, Margaret said. I'd write about the business perspective of investing in people, Richard added. And I'd write about growing up in a family that allowed me to be myself, Peter completed. The book project became a new family adventure. They spent months documenting their journey, interviewing each other, reflecting on the lessons learned. What was the moment you realized we were truly a family? Peter asked Richard during one of the writing sessions. The day you got sick and called for Margaret instead of me. I realized you had found someone you trusted completely, and I didn't feel jealous. I felt grateful. Why grateful? Because I understood you had what I most wanted to give you, emotional security. And for you, Aunt Margaret? Peter asked. The moment you called me aunt for the first time. Then I knew I had stopped being just the employee and had become part of the family. I remember that, Peter smiled. It was when you taught me about how the heart works. I thought only a special aunt would know how to explain such important things. The book, Family by Choice, Our Journey of Shared Dreams, was published a year later and became an unexpected success. Not just among professionals in the field, but among families who identified with the story. We received over 1,000 letters from readers, Peter said one afternoon, organizing the correspondence. What do they say? Margaret asked. Families telling their own stories of overcoming. Adoptive parents, stepfathers and stepmothers, grandparents raising grandchildren, people who became family even without kinship. Does that mean we're not unique? Richard joked. It means we're part of something bigger, families that form through love, not obligation. The book's success brought speaking invitations across the country. The family began traveling together, sharing their story and inspiring others. You changed my perspective on what family means, a woman said after a talk in Miami. How so? Margaret asked. I'm stepmother to 2 boys and always felt insecure about my role. You showed me I don't need to replace their biological mother. I just need to genuinely love them and offer my best. And how's it going? Liz Peter asked. Better. I stopped trying to be perfect and started being true. These interactions reinforced for all of them the value of the journey they had traveled together. During one of the talks, a challenging question was asked. Did you never have serious conflicts? Never thought about giving up on each other? Richard, Margaret, and Peter exchanged glances before answering. We had difficult moments, Richard said honestly. Like what? The questioner insisted. There were financially tough times when I questioned whether I could keep investing in everyone's dreams, Richard admitted. There were moments I doubted whether I deserved the opportunities I received, Margaret added. And there were moments I feared I wouldn't meet expectations, Peter completed. And how did you overcome them? By talking, the three said almost simultaneously, provoking laughter from the audience. We created a rule from the start, Margaret explained. Problems don't solve themselves. Whenever someone is bothered by something, we talk until we find a solution. And does it always work? Not always, Peter answered. Sometimes we need several conversations. Sometimes we disagree. But we never give up trying to understand each other. After 5 years of talks and workshops, the family decided to focus on local projects. Peter had expanded his community clinic to 3 units. Margaret led the largest pediatrics department in the region. Richard transformed his companies into references for social responsibility. "You know what amazes me most about our story?" Richard said one evening on the 15th anniversary of Margaret joining the family. "What?" she asked. "That it started with you teaching Peter about medicine and ended with all of us learning about life." "How so?" "Peter taught me to be a present father. You taught me that investing in people is worth more than any financial profit. Michael and his siblings taught me that talent doesn't depend on social origin." "And what did we learn?" Peter asked. "You learned that shared dreams become reality faster," Richard answered. "And that true family is about mutual support, not about DNA," Margaret added. Peter reflected for a moment. "You know what I learned most?" "What?" "That the best medicine isn't in medications or procedures, it's in the love we put into care." Margaret smiled, recognizing her own words from years ago. "And where did you learn that?" "By watching how you cared for me since I was little, and by watching how I feel when I care for my patients the way you taught me." Richard observed that Peter had become the kind of person he would have liked to be at his age, aware, compassionate, determined, but also humble. At 30, Peter married Amy, a pediatric nurse he met during residency. The ceremony was small but moving. "Margaret," Peter said during his wedding speech, "you taught me that caring for someone is the purest form of love. Amy, I promise to care for you the way I learned it's possible to care, with patience, dedication, and respect." "Richard," he continued, "you showed me that being a man is about protecting and supporting, not controlling. I promise to be for Amy the kind of partner you became for our family." After the wedding, Peter and Amy decided to live in the family home for a few months while organizing their own residence. "It's strange having someone else in our dynamic," Amy said to Margaret one afternoon. "Strange how?" "You 3 have a harmony built over years. Sometimes I feel like an intruder." "Amy," Margaret stopped what she was doing. "True family always has room for more love. You're not intruding, you're expanding our circle." "How can I fit in better?" "By being yourself. Peter chose you because you have qualities that complement ours. Don't try to imitate what already exists. Contribute what's unique to you." Amy integrated into the family naturally. She brought nursing knowledge that enriched medical discussions and a different perspective on childcare. 1 year after the wedding, Peter and Amy announced they were expecting their first child. "Will it be a boy or a girl?" Richard asked, eager to become a grandfather. "We want it to be a surprise," Amy replied. "And have you thought about names?" Margaret asked. "If it's a girl, we want to name Emma in honor of Daddy," Peter said. "And if it's a boy?" "Gabriel," Amy answered, "in honor of someone very special who saved our family." Margaret was moved. Gabriel had been the name of the poor boy from the first story Richard had read years ago, who knew how to save the millionaire's daughter. Peter had kept that story as inspiration. "Why Gabriel?" Richard asked, curious. "Because just like the Gabriel from that story, Aunt Margaret came into our lives knowing exactly what we needed, even when we didn't know we needed it." During Amy's pregnancy, the whole family mobilized to prepare for the baby's arrival. Margaret shared her obstetric knowledge, Richard organized the nursery, and Peter obsessively studied child development. "You're more nervous than Amy," Margaret observed during a prenatal appointment. "I want to be the best father possible from day one." "Peter, you already know how to be. You've observed the best examples for years. But it's different when it's your own child. It is different, but you have a solid foundation. You know what it's like to be cared for with love. You know what it's like to care with love. The rest you learn day by day." Gabriel was born on a March morning, healthy and calm. Peter held his son for the first time with tears in his eyes. "Hi, Gabriel. I'm your daddy, Peter, and you're going to grow up in the most amazing family in the world." Margaret watched the scene, remembering when she met little Peter. Now she would be Gabriel's grandma, doctor, continuing the cycle of care that had begun years ago. "Dr. Margaret," Peter said, extending the baby to her. "Want to meet your first grandson?" Margaret took Gabriel in her arms with the expertise of someone who had cared for hundreds of babies, but with the emotion of someone receiving a real grandchild. "Hi, Gabriel. Your family waited a long time for you." Richard watched 3 generations of the family they had built together. Peter, now a father. Margaret, now a grandmother. And he, who had evolved from a distant businessman to patriarch of a family based on chosen love. "Margaret," he said that night, after everyone had gone to sleep, "thank you for coming into our lives. Thank you for letting me stay. Did you never doubt it would work? I doubted many times, but Peter always gave me hope. That? He showed me every day that genuine care always bears fruit, that when you plant love, you harvest multiplied love. And now, with Gabriel arriving, how do you feel?" "Complete. I have a profession I love, a family I chose, and now I get to watch the next generation grow up with the values we built together." "Do you think Gabriel will go into medicine too?" "It doesn't matter what Gabriel chooses. What matters is that he'll grow up knowing he can count on a family that supports his dreams, whatever they may be." 6 months after Gabriel was born, Peter made a proposal that moved the whole family. "I want to legally formalize that Margaret is my adoptive mother and Gabriel's grandmother." "Peter, that's not necessary," Margaret said, touched by the proposal. "It's necessary for me. I want it to be in writing that you're an official part of our family." "And how does Amy feel about this?" Richard asked. "Amy was the one who suggested it," Peter smiled. "She said Gabriel deserves to officially have the best grandmother in the world." The adoption process was symbolic, since Peter was an adult, but emotionally significant. The day the papers were signed, Margaret officially became Margaret Wilson Thompson. "Now we're a real family on paper too," Peter said, showing the updated certificate. "We've always been a real family," Richard said. "The papers just confirmed what our hearts already knew." Gabriel grew up surrounded by 3 generations of medical care. Peter as a pediatrician father, Margaret as a pediatrician grandmother, and Amy as a nurse mother. But more importantly, he grew up surrounded by examples of how people can choose and support each other. At 2 years old, Gabriel already showed signs of the family's characteristic curiosity. "Grandma Margaret, why does the heart make noise?" he asked one afternoon at the clinic. "Because it's working to keep you alive and healthy," she answered patiently. "And it never stops." "It never stops, just like the love we feel for you." Richard watched the scene, remembering similar conversations between Margaret and Peter years ago. History was repeating itself, but in an even richer and more complete way. "Grandpa Richard," Gabriel ran to him, "Daddy said you had a very big company." "I have 3 companies." "And do you like it?" "I do. But you know what I like more?" "What?" "Being at home with you all." Gabriel smiled and went back to playing, but the answer had touched on something important. Richard had truly found the balance between professional success and family happiness. During an annual review meeting at the community clinic, the numbers impressed even Peter. "We treated 15,000 patients last year," Amy reported. 15,000 families, Peter corrected. "When we treat a child, we impact the entire family structure." "And the satisfaction results?" Margaret asked. 98% approval. "The complaints are always about the full schedule, never about the quality of care." "What does that mean?" Richard asked. "It means we need to expand," Peter said. "Open more units, train more doctors, impact more communities." Margaret looked thoughtful. "Peter, expansion is good, but it can't compromise the quality of care we provide. That's why I want to do it slowly, training personally every doctor who will work with us." "And how would you ensure they follow our methodology?" "By having them spend time here observing how we work, just like I learned by watching you." The expansion proposal became a new family project. Richard would help with the administrative and financial part. Margaret would develop the training protocols. Peter would lead the medical training. Amy would coordinate the nursing team. "And me?" Gabriel asked, now 3 years old and always wanting to be part of everything. "You'll be our official consultant on what children like," Peter said seriously. "Is it an important job?" "The most important of all. Gabriel took his role very seriously. During the planning meetings, he would give opinions about wall colors, types of toys, and even about how doctors should talk to children. "Children like it when the doctor sits at their level to talk," he said in one meeting. "How do you know that?" an architect asked. "Because I like it when they do that with me." Margaret smiled, seeing how Gabriel was intuitively understanding basic principles of pediatrics just by observing and reflecting on his own experiences. The first branch of the clinic was opened in Camden, a town in the greater New York area with many families in socially vulnerable situations. "Why did you choose here?" a local journalist asked during the opening. "Because this is where they need it most," Peter answered. "Children in at-risk situations deserve access to quality healthcare, not just basic healthcare." "And how do you plan to sustain a quality clinic in a low-income area?" "Part of the services will be free, supported by the private consultations. It's a social model, not just a commercial one." "Is that economically viable?" "It's viable when you're not focused solely on profit," Richard intervened. "The goal is social impact. Profit is a consequence, not the objective." The Camden branch became an even greater success than the original clinic. The community embraced the project with gratitude, and other towns began requesting units as well. During an evaluation of the new unit's first 6 months, the results surprised even the most optimistic. A 40% reduction in pediatric hospitalizations in the region, Peter reported. "How do you explain this?" a representative from City Hall asked. "Preventive medicine works," Margaret explained. "When you teach families to properly care for children's health, you prevent small problems from becoming serious ones." "And it saves public resources," Richard added. "Exactly. It's a model that benefits everyone. Families have access to quality care, the public system has less overload, and healthcare professionals can focus on truly complex cases." The methodology developed by the Thompson family began to be studied by universities as an innovative model of community medicine. During a keynote lecture that Peter was invited to give at Harvard Medical School, a student asked a question that made him reflect deeply. "Dr. Peter, what is the secret to maintaining medical humanization even with a high volume of patients? Remembering that each patient is a unique individual, but also remembering that you are not alone in this mission." "How so?" "Medical work is teamwork. When you share care with other professionals who share the same values, you can maintain human quality even while seeing many people." "And how do you form these teams?" "By starting at home. If you have a solid family foundation, you can create solid professional teams." After the lecture, Peter called Margaret to tell her how it went. "I mentioned our family as an example of how healthy relationships reflect in professional work." "And how did they react?" "They wanted to know more details about our story. I think we'll receive invitations for more lectures." "Do you like talking about our family?" "I do, because our story proves that it's possible to build something beautiful, even when we start from difficult situations." "Peter?" "Yes?" "Thank you for allowing me to be part of your story. Thank you for making my story possible." That night, Margaret had a conversation with Richard that completed a cycle that had begun 20 years earlier. "Richard, do remember the first time we talked about my family in Baltimore?" "I do. You were sending almost your entire minimum wage to your siblings. They all graduated and are doing well now. Michael is a partner in your company. Lucas is a successful civil engineer. Amanda became a math teacher. And how do you feel about that?" "Fulfilled. Not just because I managed to help them, but because I did it without giving up on my own dreams. You proved that it's possible to care for others and yourself at the same time. I learned that here. Peter taught me that my dreams were important too. You gave me the foundation to pursue those dreams. Amy showed me that there's always room for more love in the family. And Gabriel? Gabriel reminds me every day why all of this is worth it. When I see in his eyes the same curiosity that Peter had, I know we're doing the right thing." Richard felt a deep peace. At 57 years old, he had built more than just thriving businesses. He had built a human legacy that would last for generations. On Gabriel's 5th birthday, the family organized a party at the original practice. Patients, fellow doctors, company employees, friends from lectures, everyone was there. 5 years of Gabriel, 20 years of Peter in our family, 15 years since Dr. Margaret graduated, Richard said during his speech. But more important than these numbers is what we've built together. Proof that love and determination can overcome any obstacle. Peter spoke next. Gabriel, when you grow up, you'll discover how lucky you were. Not just to have been born into a loving family, but to have grown up seeing examples of how to turn challenges into opportunities. Margaret was the last to speak. Gabriel, Peter, Amy, Richard, Michael, Lucas, Amanda. She looked at each one. Thank you for teaching me that family is about the daily choice to genuinely care for one another. What now? Someone from the audience shouted. Now we keep going, Gabriel replied, making everyone laugh. The party ended late at night, but nobody wanted it to be over. It was a celebration not just of a birthday, but of 2 decades of a family that had formed against the odds and become extraordinary. In the following months, the family received a proposal that would once again change the course of their lives. The Department of Health and Human Services wanted to implement the Thompson Clinic's methodology as a national program. It would be a way to bring our model to the entire country, Peter explained during a family meeting. But it would mean much more responsibility and travel, Amy considered. And less time together at home, Richard added. And Gabriel growing up with parents who are always traveling. Margaret completed the list of concerns. The family spent weeks discussing the proposal. Each one presented arguments, concerns, and suggestions. I think we should accept, Gabriel said one afternoon, surprising everyone. Why, sweetheart? Amy asked. Because you always teach me that when we can help more people, we should help. But do you understand it would mean that Daddy and Mommy would travel more? I understand. But I also understand that Grandma Margaret and Grandpa Richard will be here, and that you're doing this to help other families like ours. Gabriel's wisdom at 5 years old convinced the adults. They decided to accept the government's proposal, but with specific conditions. Peter and Amy would travel alternately, never both at the same time. Margaret would continue to focus on the local clinics. Richard would coordinate the administrative expansion, and Gabriel would remain the center that kept everyone united. The national program was launched 2 years later, in 50 cities across the country. Each unit strictly followed the protocols developed by the Thompson family over decades of experience. You've changed the face of pediatrics in the United States, a secretary said during the launch ceremony. We didn't do it alone, Peter replied. Every family that comes through our clinics helps improve what we offer. And what's the next step? To train a new generation of doctors who understand medicine as comprehensive care, not just treating diseases. During the ceremony, Gabriel asked the secretary a question that made everyone smile. Mr. Secretary, will all children in the United States now have cool doctors like my daddy and my grandma? We'll work toward that, Gabriel. That's good. Children deserve doctors who understand children. That night, on the way back to New York, the family talked about the impact of what they had achieved. Do you realize our story started with a hidden otoscope and led to changes in national health policy? Richard observed. We didn't plan this, Margaret said. We just did what seemed right at each moment. And what was the key? Amy asked. You never gave up on each other, Gabriel answered with the innocent wisdom he always showed. Peter picked up his son. Gabriel, do you understand why our family is special? Because we really love each other, not just say we love. How do you know the difference? Because when someone really loves, they stay together when things get hard. You always stayed together. Margaret looked out the car window, watching the city of New York pass by. 22 years earlier, she had arrived in that city desperate, carrying only a suitcase and many lost dreams. Now she was returning home as the matriarch of a family that had transformed not only their lives, but the lives of thousands of other families across the country. Richard, she said softly. Yes? Thank you for coming home 3 hours early that day in May. Why? Because if you had come home at the usual time, you might never have seen me with the otoscope, and our story could have been completely different. Sometimes the best things in life happen by chance, Mihi replied. It wasn't chance, Peter said from the back seat. It was destiny. You were meant to meet, to form our family. Do you believe in destiny? Amy asked, curious. I believe some people are made to be together, and when they meet, amazing things happen. Gabriel, who had fallen asleep during the trip, woke up when they arrived home. Are we here? He asked, rubbing his eyes. We're home, Margaret said, carrying him inside. Our home is the best in the world, Gabriel murmured, still sleepy. Why? Peter asked. Because here everyone takes care of everyone. That night, after Gabriel fell asleep, the family gathered in the living room to reflect on everything they had achieved and plan the next steps. What's our next big goal? Richard asked. My goal is to see Gabriel grow up healthy and happy, Amy said. Mine is to make sure the national program works perfectly, Peter said. Mine is to write more books about pediatrics and train the next generation of compassionate doctors, Margaret said. And my goal is to see our family continue growing and inspiring others, Richard finished. 3 months later, Gabriel asked a question that would change everyone's perspective again. Daddy, why don't some children have a family like ours? Peter stopped organizing the medications to look at his son. What do you mean, Gabriel? At the clinic, I saw a girl who said she doesn't have a grandma or grandpa. And there was a boy who said his parents fight a lot. Not all families are the same, my love, Amy explained gently. But could they all be? Gabriel's innocent question planted a seed that would blossom into something unexpected. Peter talked to Margaret about their son's observation. He's right, Margaret said. We see many children from dysfunctional families. Some could benefit from a model like ours. Are you suggesting expanding beyond medicine? I'm suggesting we create a family support program, not just to treat sick children, but to strengthen vulnerable families. The idea evolved quickly. Richard used his business contacts to study the feasibility of a community center that would offer not only medical care, but also family guidance, parenting education, and activities to strengthen bonds. It would be like a laboratory for building healthy families, Peter said during a planning meeting. And how would we measure success? By the quality of the relationships families develop. More secure children, more confident parents, stronger ties. And who would run this program? We would, Gabriel said simply. Our family teaches other families. The proposal was ambitious, but everyone felt motivated by the possibility of impacting lives in an even broader way. During preparations for the new project, Margaret received a call that would change everything. It was from an investigative journalist from New York. Dr. Margaret, I'm doing a story on non-traditional families that have worked out. Your story came up several times in my research. How so? Many people mention you as an example of how different types of families can work perfectly. And what would you like to know? I would like to make a documentary about your journey, from the beginning when Mr. Richard found you with medical equipment. Margaret felt her heart race. The idea of having her story documented publicly was frightening and exciting at the same time. I need to talk to my family about this. Of course, but I can tell you it would be a documentary focused on the inspirational aspect, not the sensationalist one. That night, the family gathered to discuss the proposal. A documentary about us. Gabriel was excited. It would be a way to show other people that family can be built in many ways, Peter pondered. But it would also mean losing privacy, Amy warned. And exposure that could bring unforeseen consequences, Richard added. What do you all think we should do? Margaret asked. Gabriel raised his hand as if he were in school. I think we should do it. Why? Amy asked. Because when something good happens to you, it's nice to share it so it can happen to other people too. Gabriel's simple logic resonated with everyone. They decided to accept making the documentary, but with specific conditions about how their story would be told. The production of the documentary brought deep reflections for each family member. Reliving key moments of their journey through interviews and reenactments brought up emotions that had been stored away for years. How would you describe the moment you realized you were a real family? The director asked during a group session. It wasn't a specific moment, Richard answered. It was a gradual process of realizing we genuinely cared for each other. For me, it was when Peter called me to meet Gabriel at the hospital, Margaret added. There I understood I had truly become part of his family, not just someone who lived in the same house. For me, it was when I realized I could tell you anything without being judged, Peter said. And for you, Gabriel? I always knew we were family. I never knew any different. Gabriel's answer deeply touched everyone present. He had grown up considering normal what others found exceptional. During one of the individual recording sessions, Margaret made a revelation that surprised even Richard. When I found out I couldn't have biological children, I thought I would never be a real mother. Peter proved to me that motherhood doesn't depend on genetics, it depends on love and daily dedication. What was it like discovering that about yourself? Devastating. I was in my 4th year of college when I had my routine checkups. The doctor said a congenital condition made pregnancy impossible. Did that influence your decision to drop out of school? Very much. I felt I had lost 2 dreams at once, becoming a doctor and becoming a mother. When my father got sick, it felt like the universe was confirming I didn't deserve happiness. And how did Peter change that perspective? Peter showed me that motherhood is about caring, teaching, being present, all those things I could do perfectly. Biology was just a detail. And now, being Gabriel's grandma. Now I know the maternal love I feel for Peter and Gabriel is as real as any biological love. Maybe even more intense because it was consciously chosen. Margaret's revelation became one of the most moving parts of the documentary. Her journey of overcoming gained an additional layer of depth. During the filming with Peter, he shared details about what it was like growing up with 2 such different parental figures. My father taught me about perseverance and responsibility. Margaret taught me about compassion and care. Together, they gave me a complete education on being human. And how did that influence your way of being a father? I try to give Gabriel the same thing I received, unconditional support, but also challenges to grow. Love without overprotection. Do you see differences between how your father raised you and how you raise Gabriel? My father learned to be present with me. I've known how to be present with Gabriel since day one. That's an advantage my children will have. Children, are you planning to have more? Amy is pregnant again, Peter smiled. We'll announce it to the family at the end of the month. The news of the 2nd pregnancy brought renewed joy to the whole family. Gabriel was excited about the prospect of being a big brother. I'll teach everything I know to my brother or sister, he said. And what do you know? Margaret joked. I know how to make Grandma smile when she's tired. I know how to make Grandpa tell funny stories. I know how to make Daddy and Mommy proud. And how do you do all that? By being nice to everyone and always telling the truth. The simplicity of Gabriel's life philosophy continued to surprise the adults. During the 5th month of pregnancy, Amy and Peter found out they were expecting a girl. They decided to name her Emma as they had planned years before. Emma Thompson. Gabriel tested the name. I like it. It'll suit her. How do you know? Amy laughed. Because it's a strong name like the women in our family. Which women? Margaret asked, curious. You, who never gave up on being a doctor. Mommy, who takes care of everyone. And now Emma, who will grow up seeing these examples. Gabriel's perception of family dynamics continued to impress everyone. The documentary Family by Choice: The Thompson Story was released 6 months before Emma's birth. The impact was immediate and nationwide. Families from all over the United States sent letters sharing their own stories of overcoming. Adoptive parents, stepmothers and stepfathers, grandparents raising grandchildren, people who had become family through unusual circumstances. You gave voice to a movement that already existed, the documentary's director said. You just made visible something many families live silently. And now? Peter asked. Now you've become spokespeople for a new concept of family. The responsibility was great, but the family decided to embrace it. They began receiving families at home for informal conversations about building healthy relationships. It's like our house has become a counseling office for families, Amy observed one Saturday afternoon. Does it bother you? Richard asked. On the contrary. It's rewarding to see other people finding hope in our story. Emma was born on a September morning, healthy and serene. Gabriel insisted on holding her first, after the parents. Hi, Emma. I'm your brother Gabriel. I'll always take care of you, he said solemnly. Margaret watched the scene, remembering when Peter was little, and she promised to care for him. Now there was a new generation that would grow up with even more love and structure. "Dr. Margaret," Peter said, placing Emma in her arms, "I present our second official granddaughter. Hi, little one. Welcome to the craziest and most loving family in New York." Richard photographed the moment, knowing that image would represent the continuity of everything they had built together. In Emma's first months of life, Gabriel proved to be an exceptional big brother. He helped change diapers, sang her to sleep, and always stayed nearby when she cried. "Gabriel, you don't have to look after Emma all the time," Amy said one afternoon. "I like taking care of her." "Why?" "Because when I was little, everyone took care of me. Now it's my turn to care for someone." Peter observed that Gabriel had naturally embraced the concept of mutual care in a way that had taken him years to understand. During one of Emma's pediatric checkups, an unexpected situation tested all the family's medical knowledge. "She has an atypical skin rash," Margaret said, examining the baby. "It's nothing I've ever seen before." "Is it serious?" Amy asked, worried. "It doesn't appear to be, but we'll investigate carefully." Peter examined his daughter too, reaching the same conclusion as Margaret. "Symptoms are very specific. Let's run some tests to rule out rare conditions." The tests revealed Emma had a very rare food allergy to a specific protein in breast milk. The treatment was simple, but the diagnosis had been complex. "How did you identify this so quickly?" the pediatric allergist asked. "We've worked together for over 15 years, Margaret explained. "We recognize rare symptoms because we constantly discuss cases among ourselves." "And because we observe Emma 24 hours a day," Peter added. Medical families have advantages in early diagnosis. Emma's case became study material for the book Margaret was writing about differential diagnosis in pediatrics. When Emma was 6 months old, the family received a proposal that would test their unity once again. An American university wanted Peter to do a postdoctoral fellowship in community family medicine. It would be a unique opportunity to learn international methodologies, Peter explained during dinner. "For how long?" Richard asked. 2 years. "And would we go along?" Amy asked. "The whole family would be welcome." Gabriel, now 7 years old, grew thoughtful. "Daddy, if we go to another country, will Grandma Margaret and Grandpa Richard come too? They would have to decide if they want to go. And if they don't want to, then we'd have to choose between the opportunity and staying close to family." Gabriel shook his head. "Can't do it. Our family can't be separated." "Why not?" Amy asked. "Because we work together. Separated, we're not the same thing." Gabriel's observation made everyone reflect on how healthily interdependent they had become. Margaret broke the silence. "What if we all went?" "How do you mean?" Richard asked. "I can take leave from my hospital directorship. You can manage the businesses remotely for 2 years. It would be an interesting experience for all of us." "And the clinics?" "They can remain under Michael's management and the team we trained. It would test how the model works without our direct supervision." The family spent weeks discussing the possibility. Gabriel was the most enthusiastic about the idea of living abroad temporarily. "I'll learn English and then teach it to the children here when we return," he said. The final decision was made on a rainy night, with everyone gathered in the living room. "Let's vote," Richard said. "Who's in favor of all of us going to the United States for 2 years?" Everyone raised their hand, including Gabriel. "Why do you want to go?" Margaret asked him. "Because I want to see how other families live. Maybe we'll learn new things to teach when we come back." The move to Boston happened 8 months later. The university offered a house for the whole family, impressed by the unusual family model that Peter had presented. "It's rare to see 3 generations moving together to support one member's career," the program coordinator said. "For us, it's natural," Peter replied. "We've always supported each other's dreams." Gabriel adapted to the American school with surprising ease. His natural curiosity and knowledge about basic medicine impressed teachers and classmates. "My grandpa has companies in the United States. My grandma is a famous doctor, and my parents are doctors too," he would proudly tell anyone who asked about his family. During the first year in Boston, Peter absorbed community medicine methodologies that didn't exist in the United States. Margaret took refresher courses in preventive pediatrics. Richard studied business models with a social focus. Gabriel became fluent in English in 6 months. "How are you all feeling?" Peter asked one December night. "I'm learning things that will revolutionize our work in the United States," Margaret said. "I'm seeing ways to make our companies even more socially impactful," Richard added. "And I'm understanding how to explain our story to children from different cultures," Gabriel said seriously. "How so?" Amy asked. "At school, when I tell them about our family, the children get curious. They ask how it's possible to be so close. I'm learning to explain that family love is built with actions, not just words." Peter was impressed by the social maturity Gabriel was developing. During the second year in Boston, Emma started crawling and saying her first words. To everyone's surprise, her first words were Grandma and Grandpa, referring to Margaret and Richard. "She recognizes you as central figures in her life," Amy observed. "It's natural," Margaret said, picking up Emma. "Children notice who cares for them with love, regardless of family titles." Gabriel became the official translator between Emma and the rest of the family. "She wants Grandma to sing that lullaby," he would say. "How do you know?" Peter asked. "From her gestures, and because I liked that song too when I was little." The connection between Gabriel and Emma was developing the same way it had between Peter and Margaret years before, based on mutual understanding and genuine care. At the end of the postdoctorate, Peter received offers to stay in the United States permanently. "Harvard wants to hire you to lead a new family medicine department," Amy said after a meeting at the university. "And do you want to accept?" Richard asked. "It's an incredible professional opportunity." "But," Margaret sensed the hesitation, "but our mission is in the United States. The families who need what we've learned are there." Gabriel, who was playing on the floor with Emma, looked up. "Daddy, do you want to stay here or go back home?" "I want to do what's best for our family." "Then let's go back. The United States is our real home." The decision was unanimous. They would return to the United States with new knowledge, but with the certainty that their hearts belonged to the land where they had built their story. The return to New York was emotional. The clinics had run perfectly under Michael's management, proving that the model they had created was sustainable and replicable. "How is it managing everything alone?" Richard asked Michael. "Challenging but rewarding. I better understood how you managed to build something so solid." "Any lessons learned?" "That when you train people with the right values, they make the right decisions even when you're not present." Peter resumed his duties at the clinics with renewed energy. The American methodologies he had learned were adapted to the United States reality, further improving the quality of care. Gabriel returned to the American school as a minor celebrity. His classmates wanted to know everything about life in the United States. "What did you like most there?" a friend asked. "The giant libraries and the parks. But I missed our home here more." "Why?" "Because here I have my favorite office and can help my daddy and my grandma take care of the children." The teacher was curious about Gabriel's answer. "Gabriel, tell the class about your family." Gabriel stood up, always comfortable speaking in public. "My family is different because we chose each other. My grandpa adopted my grandma when she needed to fulfill her dream. My parents met because they both wanted to help children. And I was born in the middle of it all." "And why is that special?" "Because when you choose your family, you take better care of it. And when everyone takes care of everyone, everyone is happy." The teacher was so impressed that she asked Gabriel to give a presentation about different families to other classes at the school. While preparing the presentation, Gabriel asked each family member about their perspectives. "Grandma, what do you like most about our family?" "That we never stop learning from each other," Margaret answered. "Grandpa, and you?" "That we always find ways to grow together, even when we face difficulties," Richard said. "Daddy?" "That each generation tries to be better than the previous one, but always respecting what was built before." "Mommy?" "That true love is proven in daily actions, not just words." Gabriel wrote down all the answers and created a presentation that moved not only the children, but also the teachers and parents who watched. "How did you build such a close-knit family?" a mother asked after the presentation. By always talking, supporting each other's dreams, and never giving up when things get tough, Gabriel answered as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Gabriel's presentation went viral on the school's social media, catching the attention of the local media. 8-year-old boy gives lesson on modern family, one headline said. Gabriel Thompson teaches adults about unconditional love, another reported. The media attention brought unexpected consequences. The family began receiving invitations for television shows and interviews. They want Gabriel to participate in a national show about families, Amy said during dinner. And does he want to? Margaret asked. I asked if he would like to speak on television to the entire United States about our family, Peter said. And what was his answer? That he would only speak if he could tell the full story from when Grandma arrived with the otoscope. Peter laughed. He wants to make sure people understand how it all began. Gabriel's participation in the national show was an absolute success. His naturalness and early wisdom captivated the audience and hosts. Gabriel, what advice would you give to children who don't have a family like yours? The host asked. That they can help build a better family by being kind to the people who take care of them. Sometimes adults are also learning how to be family. And for adults, that children notice when you're pretending to like them and when you really like them. It's better to always be genuine. After the show, the family received thousands of messages from viewers. Thank you for showing me I can be a better stepmother. Amy read one of the messages. My grandson taught me that family is about patience, just like Gabriel taught you. Margaret read another. I'll invest more time in my children's education, inspired by your story. Richard read a third. We're truly impacting lives, Peter observed. 2 years after Emma's birth, the family faced their biggest test since they graduated. Richard was diagnosed with a heart condition requiring delicate surgery. It's serious but operable, the cardiologist explained. With proper care during recovery, there shouldn't be complications. And during recovery? Peter asked. Complete rest for 6 weeks, then gradual activities. Margaret immediately organized herself to coordinate Richard's medical care. Peter adjusted his schedule to be more present. Amy temporarily took over some administrative functions at the companies. Gabriel and Emma became the daily joy Richard needed during recovery. Grandpa, when you get better, will we play soccer again? Gabriel asked the day before surgery. We sure will. But maybe you'll have to go easy on me, Richard joked. I always go easy on you, Gabriel laughed. You're the one who thinks you're doing well. The surgery was successful, but recovery brought deep reflections for Richard. I never thought about fragility, he told Margaret one afternoon. What do you mean? I always thought I could control everything. Business, health, future. Now I understand some things escape our control. And that scares you? It comforts me. It means I can relax and trust more in the people around me. Peter is managing the companies perfectly, Margaret observed. He is. He learned not just about medicine, but about leadership too. During Richard's recovery, Peter made business decisions that impressed even the most experienced partners. How do you balance medicine and administration? An executive asked. By applying the same principles, caring for people, making value-based decisions, thinking about long-term impact. And it works? Our companies are more profitable and more socially respected than ever. What's the secret? There's no secret. It's about treating employees like family, clients like partners, and profit as a consequence of doing things right. Richard's full recovery took 3 months. During this period, the family grew even closer. Gabriel and Emma spent hours entertaining their grandfather, while the adults took turns with care. You know what impresses me most, Richard said one afternoon. What? Margaret asked. How everyone naturally took on necessary responsibilities. Nobody needed to ask or coordinate. You all just took care of things. That's what families do, Gabriel said, looking up from the book he was reading to Emma. Not all families do that, Gabriel. Then they need to learn. Like we learned. Richard realized Gabriel considered natural something that had taken him decades to understand. That mutual care isn't obligation, it's daily choice. When Richard fully returned to activities, the family was more united than ever. The illness experience had strengthened bonds and proven they could count on each other in any circumstance. "Now I understand why you always talk about chosen family," Amy said one evening. "During these months, I saw how you truly behave when someone needs help." "What do you mean?" Peter asked. "Without drama, without complaint, without expecting recognition, you simply took care of what needed caring for." "Because that's what family does," Emma said, surprising everyone by joining the conversation with her first complete sentences at 2 years old. "What does family do, Emma?" Margaret asked. "Takes care," she answered simply. Gabriel applauded his sister's answer. Emma understood. Family takes care. 3 years after Richard's surgery, the family received an unexpected honor. New York City Hall created the Thompson Family Award to recognize non-traditional families that contribute significantly to the community. "You've become a symbol of how love builds strong families," the mayor said during the ceremony. "It's an honor, but also a responsibility," Peter responded. "Responsibility how?" "To continue proving that our story wasn't just luck. It was daily work of choosing to love and support each other." Gabriel, now 10 years old, gave the family speech during the ceremony. "I grew up thinking every family was like ours. When I found out they weren't, I realized we had something special. But what's special isn't luck. It's the effort to be kind to each other every day." "And what's the message for other families?" a journalist asked. "That you can build a family like ours if you want. You just need to choose to truly care, not just pretend to care." Gabriel's direct honesty, without adult filters, deeply touched the audience. Emma, at 5 years old, began showing the same scientific curiosity that Peter had shown at her age. "Grandma Margaret, why do people get sick?" she asked one afternoon at the clinic. "Sometimes the body needs help to work right. It's like a car that needs a mechanic." "And are you a people mechanic?" "Children specifically?" "I want to be a butterfly mechanic," Emma said seriously. "Why?" "Because they're beautiful and must get sad when they can't fly." Margaret smiled, recognizing in Emma the same compassionate spirit she had seen in Peter years earlier. During one of Emma's routine medical checkups, she surprised the pediatrician with advanced questions. "Why do you need to look at my throat?" she asked. "To see if everything's okay inside. And if it's not okay, will you fix it? I'll try to help your body fix itself, like my grandma does with other children." "Your grandmother is a doctor." "She's the best doctor in the United States," Emma said proudly. The pediatrician looked at Margaret, who was accompanying the appointment. "She's right. Your reputation is known throughout the country." After the appointment, the doctor made an observation that touched Margaret deeply. "Emma has an understanding of medicine that's very advanced for her age, and more importantly, she isn't afraid of doctors." "Why is that important?" "Children who grow up comfortable with medical care become adults who take better care of their own health. She'll carry this with her for the rest of her life. And for her children, if she has any," Margaret added. "Exactly. You're creating a health legacy that will pass through generations." That evening, Margaret reflected on how her influence had multiplied. Peter had become a doctor inspired by her. Gabriel showed interest in caring for people. Now Emma was also showing signs of wanting to help others. "You created a medical dynasty," Richard joked during dinner. "I didn't create anything. I just showed that caring for people can be rewarding." "And we all chose to follow that example," Peter said. "Including me," Amy added. "Even though I was already a nurse, I learned a different way of caring from Margaret." "How so?" "You always put the person before the illness. That completely changed my professional approach." During a clinic evaluation meeting, Peter presented numbers that surprised even the most optimistic investors. "We treated 50,000 patients last year," he reported. 50,000 families, Margaret corrected. "Every child we treat takes our methodology home." "And the social impact results? A 60% reduction in pediatric hospitalizations in the regions we serve, an 80% increase in family satisfaction with medical care, and the creation of 200 direct jobs. Is this sustainable?" "It's not only sustainable, but replicable," Richard explained. "Each unit becomes self-sufficient in 2 years and then contributes to opening new units." What's the expansion plan? To reach all state capitals in 5 years, Peter answered. During a visit to the original clinic, Gabriel made an observation that caught everyone's attention. Grandma, the children who come here are different from when I was little. How so? They arrive less scared. It seems like they know this is a nice place. Why do you think that changed? Because the older siblings tell the younger ones that they don't need to be scared of Dr. Margaret and Dr. Peter. Margaret was moved to realize that the clinic's reputation had spread organically through the children themselves. This means our work is taking root in the community, she said to Peter. It means the children are becoming ambassadors of our methodology, he answered. Emma, now 6 years old, began observing simple appointments, always quiet and observant. Why do you like coming to the office? Margaret asked her. I like seeing the children become less sad, she replied. And how do you know they become less sad? Because they arrive crying and leave smiling, just like me when I was sad, and you made me happy. When were you sad? When I was a baby and couldn't talk, but you always understood what I wanted. Emma's perception of non-verbal communication impressed Margaret. She was developing observation skills that would be valuable regardless of the career she chose. During Gabriel's 10th birthday, the family organized a professions-themed party. Each guest was supposed to come dressed as the profession they wanted to pursue. Gabriel dressed as a doctor, naturally. Emma dressed as a veterinarian, surprising everyone. Why a veterinarian? Peter asked. Because animals need care too, but they can't explain what they feel. It's harder, she explained seriously. And you like challenges? I do. Grandpa Richard always says that difficult things are more interesting. Richard felt proud seeing his words reflected in his granddaughter's life philosophy. During the party, one of Amy's friends asked a question that sparked later reflections. How do you maintain family harmony with so many generations living together? By respecting each other's differences, Amy answered. How so? Gabriel is outgoing and likes being the center of attention. Emma is more observant and thoughtful. Peter is determined and focused. Margaret is careful and compassionate. Richard is strategic and protective. I'm practical and organized. And that doesn't create conflicts. It creates complementarity, Peter intervened. When everyone contributes their strengths, the family becomes more complete. At 11 years old, Gabriel surprised the family with a mature decision. I want to start volunteering at the clinics. Don't you think you're too young? Amy asked. Not for real work, but I can help welcome the children, play with them in the waiting room, things like that. Why do you want to do this? Because I've spent my whole life learning about caring for people. Now I want to practice. Margaret was touched by the request. Gabriel, do you understand this would be a serious responsibility? I understand and I'm prepared. How do we know you're prepared? Because you've prepared me my whole life, and because caring for people is what our family does best. Gabriel began volunteering twice a week. Your presence at the clinic brought a new energy that patients and staff loved. The children calm down immediately when Gabriel talks to them, a nurse observed. He has a natural gift, Margaret responded proudly. Where did he learn that? He grew up seeing examples of how to care with love. Now he's applying what he absorbed. Emma, seeing her brother working at the clinic, asked if she could also help. Can I play with the babies? She asked. The babies are very small, Peter explained, but you can help with children your age. How? By showing that you don't need to be afraid of doctor visits. You can be an example of how a child behaves well at the doctor's. Emma took the task very seriously. During other children's appointments, she offered to be examined first, demonstrating that it didn't hurt and wasn't scary. Why do you do that? A 5-year-old girl asked. To show that doctors are children's friends. They just want to help you stay healthy. And it really doesn't hurt? It doesn't hurt. It's just a check to make sure you're okay. Emma's technique proved so effective that Margaret formally included it in the clinic's protocol. During a national medical conference, Peter presented a paper on children as calming agents in pediatric visits based on experiences with Gabriel and Emma. The presence of same-age children demonstrating naturalness during exams significantly reduces patient anxiety, he reported. And how do you train these assistant children? We don't train them. They grow up seeing medical visits as something natural and positive, so they naturally transmit this calmness to other children. Is this replicable in other clinics? Yes, but it requires that assistant children truly have a positive relationship with medicine. It can't be forced. Peter's work won the award for Best Innovation in Pediatrics of the Year. Gabriel and Emma were in the audience when he received the trophy. I dedicate this award to the children who taught me that medicine is about trust, especially Gabriel and Emma Thompson, Peter said in his speech. Emma whispered something in Gabriel's ear, who chuckled softly. What did she say? Amy asked later. That Daddy forgot to talk about Grandma Margaret in the speech, Gabriel told. And you agreed? I agreed. Without Grandma Margaret, none of this would exist. On the way home, Peter apologized to Margaret for the omission in the speech. I was nervous and forgot to mention that everything started with you. Peter, you don't need to apologize. Your success is my pride. I don't need public recognition to know my importance in your life. But you deserve to be recognized. I'm recognized every day. By you, by Gabriel, by Emma, by Richard, by Amy, by all the patients we care for together. That's worth more than any award. At 12 years old, Gabriel began showing interests beyond medicine. He discovered a talent for music and writing. I want to write stories about families like ours, he announced during dinner. What kind of stories? Richard asked. Stories that show family isn't just about who you're born with, but about who chooses to stay together. And music? I want to compose music for the children at the practice, for them to listen to while waiting so they don't get nervous. Peter was impressed with the holistic approach Gabriel was developing toward care. You're seeing medicine even more broadly than I do, he said. How so, Daddy? You understand that caring for people involves medicine, but also art, music, literature, everything that can make someone feel better. I learned that by watching our family. Grandpa cares through business, you and Grandma through medicine, Mommy through nursing. I can care through music and stories. And me? Emma asked. You care by being nice to everyone, Gabriel answered. It's the most important care of all. During a Saturday afternoon, Emma asked a question that surprised the family. Why is our family famous? Famous how? Margaret asked. People at school always ask if I'm from the family in the documentary, and some of my friends' mothers say they want a family like ours. And how do you answer? I say our family isn't hard to have. You just need to genuinely like people and take good care of them. And do they understand? Some do, others think it must be more complicated. Peter noticed Emma was facing the challenge of growing up in a family that had become public, but managing to keep a healthy perspective about it. Emma, does it bother you that people know our story? No, but sometimes it's annoying when they expect me to be special just because our family is nice. How so? I'm just a normal child who has a family that really likes each other. I'm not smarter than other kids just because my family is close. The maturity of Emma's observation impressed all the adults. On Gabriel's 13th birthday, he asked for a different party. I want to invite some families we treat at the clinics, especially those who are trying to reorganize themselves. Why? Amy asked. So they can see how our family has fun together. Sometimes people think a close family is always serious. And you want to show that it's not? I want to show that a close family can be fun, can play, can laugh. That being family isn't boring work. The party was an absolute success. Families who were in the process of rebuilding bonds saw practical examples of how healthy relationships work in daily life. You play like children, a girl observed watching Richard and Margaret competing in a video game with Gabriel. A good family is a family that knows how to play together, Gabriel answered. During the party, Peter noticed something that moved him deeply. Several children present were imitating Gabriel and Emma's behaviors, being kind to younger children, helping adults without being asked, sharing toys naturally. Our children are positively influencing other children, he said to Amy, because they learned that caring for others is part of who they are. Where did they learn that? By watching you, Margaret and Richard, do it for years. They think it's normal to be generous and caring. At the end of the party, a mother approached Margaret. Dr. Margaret, may I ask a personal question? Of course. How do you manage to raise such generous children? By being generous with them first. Children learn much more by what they see than by what they hear. And if they test the limits? They do. Gabriel and Emma aren't perfect, but when we need to correct them, we do it with love and explanation, not with anger or punishment. And does it work? It works because they trust us. They know our corrections come from the desire to help them grow, not from irritation. The conversation inspired the mother to change her educational approach at home. 2 years later, at 15, Gabriel made a decision that surprised the family. "I don't want to study medicine." The announcement was made during a Sunday dinner, provoking complete silence at the table. "Are you sure?" Peter asked, trying to hide his disappointment. "Absolutely. I want to study psychology." "Why?" "Because I realized many problems we see at the clinics aren't medical. They're emotional. I want to help families understand each other better." Margaret was the first to recover from the surprise. "Gabriel, psychology is a beautiful field. You'll be able to help many people. Aren't you disappointed?" "Disappointed that you found your own passion?" Richard asked. "We're proud, even though I'm not following medicine." "Gabriel," Peter stood up and hugged his son. "What matters isn't whether you become a doctor. What matters is that you become someone who cares for people, and psychologists care for people too." "You'll be able to work in the clinics as a psychologist," Amy observed. "That's exactly what I want to do. Medicine and psychology working together to care for whole families." Emma, at 8 years old, clapped her hands. "Gabriel is going to be a feelings doctor." "What do you mean?" He laughed. "Doctors care for the body. You're going to care for people's hearts." The simplicity of Emma's definition perfectly captured what Gabriel wanted to do. Gabriel began preparing for the psychology entrance exams with the same dedication he had shown when considering medicine. But now, he had found his true calling. "What was it like discovering you prefer psychology?" Margaret asked one afternoon. "By observing the families we care for. I saw that many children get sick because of problems at home. I want to help solve the problems before they turn into illnesses. That's a very smart approach. I learned by watching our family. When everyone understands and respects each other, everyone becomes healthier." During Gabriel's last year of high school, Emma began showing a more serious interest in veterinary medicine. "I want to study how animals communicate when they're sick," she said. "Why?" Peter asked. "Because if I understand how they speak without words, I'll be able to help them better." "And where do you plan to apply this?" "I want to have a veterinary clinic next to our medical clinic to care for the pets of the families you all treat." Emma's idea impressed everyone with the integration it proposed. "You want to create a complete care center?" Margaret asked. "I want families to have a place where they can care for all members, including the animals." "Why include the animals?" "Because many children love their pets. When an animal gets sick, the child gets sad. If I take good care of the animal, the child becomes happy." Richard realized Emma had developed a systemic understanding of family care that went beyond what any adult had imagined. Gabriel took the psychology entrance exams and was accepted as the top candidate at 3 universities. He chose Boston College because of their family psychology program. "I want to specialize in systemic therapy," he said, "to work with whole families, not just isolated individuals." During Gabriel's first year of college, he began applying psychology knowledge at the family clinics. "Can I ask the parents some questions during consultations?" he asked Peter. "What kind of questions?" "About how the family environment is, if there's stress, conflicts, recent changes, things that might be affecting the child's health." "And do you think parents would answer honestly?" "If I ask the right way, yes. Parents want what's best for their children. If I explain that the emotional environment affects physical health, they'll cooperate." Peter allowed Gabriel to test this with 10 families. The results were surprising. 8 of the 10 children had symptoms related to specific family situations, Gabriel reported. "Like what?" "A girl with constant headaches had parents fighting over a divorce. A boy with digestive problems had recently lost his grandfather. A child with insomnia lived in a home where parents argued at night." "And were you able to help?" "I talked with the parents about how their situations were affecting the children. I gave simple suggestions for handling problems without impacting the children so much. And did it work? In all cases, the symptoms improved when the family environment became more stable. Margaret was impressed with the results. Gabriel, you've discovered a connection that many doctors don't notice. I learned by watching our family. When there's harmony at home, everyone becomes healthier. When there's conflict, everyone becomes more stressed. Peter decided to officially incorporate psychological evaluation into the clinic protocols. Gabriel became the first undergraduate psychology student to work integrated with pediatricians in the United States. Emma, at 10 years old, began attending veterinary classes for children at a local college. Her passion for animals had become more focused and scientific. "How was class today?" Margaret asked. "I learned about comparative anatomy. Dogs and humans have very similar hearts. And what does that mean to you?" "That I can use some things I learn watching you care for people to care for animals too." "How so?" "Patience, affection, careful observation. Animals need the same things as children to feel safe." Emma's integrated perspective on care was developing in a natural and sophisticated way. During an afternoon at the office, Emma watched Margaret attending to a little girl who had brought in a sick cat. "Doctor, my kitten isn't eating," the 6-year-old girl said worriedly. "And how is he behaving?" Margaret asked, naturally adapting her consultation to include the animal. "He hides and doesn't want to play." Margaret superficially examined the cat and noticed signs that it needed veterinary care. "Your kitten needs to see an animal doctor. I'll recommend a good veterinarian. But can't you take care of him?" "I care for children. Animals need special doctors for them." Emma approached. "When I grow up, I'm going to be an animal doctor. Then I can take care of your kitten." "Really?" "Really. And I'll work right next to my grandma to care for the pets of the children she treats." The girl was excited by the promise, and Margaret realized that Emma had found a perfect way to integrate her vocation with the family's work. That evening, Margaret talked with Richard about the vocations the children were developing. Gabriel will care for families' emotions, Emma will care for families' animals, Peter cares for families' health. "And Amy?" "Amy coordinates so everything works perfectly." "And me?" "You ensure all of this is sustainable and can grow." "And you?" "I'm the matriarch who watches everything happen with pride." Richard smiled. "We've become a family business of care. We've become a family that turned care into a life mission." During Gabriel's 3rd year of college, he developed an extension project that drew national attention: preventive child psychology. The idea is to identify children at emotional risk before they develop physical symptoms, he explained during a university presentation. How would that work? Through questionnaires applied in schools and routine medical consultations, simple questions about how the child feels at home, at school, with friends. And then, quick family interventions, conversations with parents, guidance about communication, workshops on healthy relationships. Would this be integrated with medical care? Exactly. Psychology and medicine working together from the first appointment. Gabriel's project was selected for pilot implementation in 5 New York schools. Emma, now 11, asked to help. "Can I talk with the children?" she asked. "About what?" "About what it's like to have a family that gets along. Sometimes children understand better when another child explains." Gabriel thought the idea was brilliant. Emma could be our child ambassador. She speaks the language of children better than any adult. Emma's participation in the project brought unexpected results. Children opened up to her about problems they didn't tell adults. "Emma, how do you get them to trust you so quickly?" Gabriel asked. "Because I don't ask adult questions. I talk about things they like, and then they tell me about things that make them sad. And then I tell them how our family solves problems by talking, and they want to try doing the same at home." Gabriel documented Emma's natural techniques and turned them into a protocol for other similar projects. During a presentation of the pilot project results, the numbers impressed even the skeptics. A 45% reduction in psychosomatic symptoms among participating children, Gabriel reported, and a 70% improvement in family communication, according to parent reports. Emma added, reading from her notes. An 11-year-old participated in the research, one evaluator asked. Emma not only participated, she was fundamental to the results, Gabriel explained. Children open up more easily with other children. Is this ethical? It's supervised by qualified adults, and Emma receives training on confidentiality and boundaries, Peter clarified. The project gained approval for statewide expansion. Emma became the youngest child consultant in the United States, working on preventive mental health projects. At 45, Margaret received the highest recognition of her career. She was invited to become dean of the country's first school of community medicine. It's a chance to train doctors who think like us, she said during dinner. And do you want to accept? Richard asked. I do, but only if I can implement our methodology as the official curricular foundation. Did they agree to that? They agreed. They want me to create a completely new course based on integral medicine and family care. Gabriel got excited. Grandma, you're going to be a teacher of doctors. I am, and I want you and Emma to participate in the course too. How? By teaching future doctors about how children perceive medical care, a perspective only you two can offer. The proposal to include children in medical education was revolutionary. Gabriel and Emma became the first official child teachers at a medical school. What do you teach the students? A journalist asked. We teach them that a child is not a small adult, Emma answered. Children think differently, feel differently, need to be cared for differently. And how do you know this? Because we are children, Gabriel said with simple logic, and we grew up being cared for the right way. During her first year as dean, Margaret implemented changes that completely transformed medical education at the school. Students now spent time observing healthy families before learning about dysfunctions. They learned about compassionate communication before learning technical procedures. They practiced holistic care from the first semester. The students are graduating with a completely different education, the pedagogical coordinator reported. How so? They see medicine as human care, not just as pure science. And this is reflected in how they treat patients. And the results? Patient satisfaction at the hospitals where they intern has increased by 80%. Margaret's pedagogical model began to be studied by other schools across the country. Emma and Gabriel became central pieces of the new teaching method. At 17, Gabriel took the psychology entrance exam and was accepted in first place at every university he applied to. He chose to stay in New York to continue working with the family. Don't you want to try studying in another city? Peter asked. Why? Gabriel replied. Here I have the best structure to learn what I really want. Psychology applied to family care. Emma, at 13, had already decided she would study veterinary medicine at the same university where Peter had studied medicine. I want to keep the family tradition of studying at Johns Hopkins, she said. And after that? Later, I'll set up my veterinary clinic on the same property as the medical clinics. We'll have a comprehensive care center, medicine, psychology, and veterinary care. Emma's vision for the family's future impressed everyone with the integration she proposed. During a family meeting to plan the next 5 years, each member presented their personal goals and how they connected with the family's objectives. I want to train a generation of humanized doctors, Margaret said. I want to expand our clinics to all regions of the country, Peter said. I want to develop preventive psychology protocols that work nationwide, Gabriel said. I want to create the first veterinary center integrated with family care in the United States, Emma said. I want to ensure all of this is sustainable and positively impacts as many people as possible, Richard said. And I want to coordinate everything so our family mission keeps growing, Amy added. Gabriel looked around the table. Do you realize each of us has found a different way to care for people? How so? Amy asked. Grandma cares by teaching, Daddy cares by treating, Mummy cares by organizing, Grandpa cares by providing structure, I'll care by listening. Emma will care for the little animals, but it's all care. Gabriel's observation perfectly synthesized the identity the family had developed over the years. Emma enthusiastically tapped the table. Our family is a team of caregivers. Exactly, Margaret smiled, and each generation adds new ways of caring. 2 years later, When Gabriel graduated in psychology and Emma entered veterinary school, the family officially inaugurated the Thompson Integrated Family Care Center. The space included medical offices, psychological therapy rooms, a veterinary clinic, space for family workshops, and a community library focused on health and relationships. "It's the first center of its kind in the United States," the mayor said during the inauguration. "And in the world, according to our research," Peter added. "How did the idea come about?" "By observing that families need care at different levels," Gabriel explained. "Medical, emotional, and yes, including the pets that are part of the family." During the inauguration ceremony, Richard gave the main speech. "This center represents 25 years of a family journey. We started with a housekeeper who had hidden medical knowledge and arrived at a care model being studied internationally." "And what was the secret?" a journalist asked. "Never giving up on each other, always believing that every person has potential to be better, and understanding that care multiplies when shared." "And plans for the future?" "Train new professionals who work on integration between medicine, psychology, and animal care. Create a new generation of caregivers who understand family as a complete system." Gabriel asked to speak too. "I want to especially thank my grandma, Margaret. If she hadn't arrived at our house with an otoscope 25 years ago, none of this would exist." "And now," the same journalist asked, "now we'll prove our model works on a national scale. In 5 years, we want to have centers like this in every state capital in the United States." Emma, at 15, gave the final speech. "I grew up watching my family turn dreams into reality. Now it's my turn to dream. I want every child in the United States to have access to medical care, emotional care, and for their little animals to be well treated too." "And how do you plan to do that?" "Working together with my family. Alone it would be impossible, but together we can do everything." Emma's phrase became the center's official slogan, "Together we can do everything." 3 years after the center's inauguration, the Thompson family methodology was being implemented in 12 U.S. states. Gabriel had become a national reference in preventive family psychology. Emma was in her 3rd year of veterinary school and was already treating animals at the center on weekends. During a national impact evaluation, the results exceeded all expectations. A 55% reduction in emergency pediatric visits in the regions where we operate, Peter reported. A 70% increase in family satisfaction with medical care, Gabriel added. And a 40% reduction in pet abandonment, because families now have access to affordable veterinary care, Emma concluded. "How do you explain these results?" An evaluator from the Department of Health and Human Services asked. "When you care for a family holistically, all aspects of life improve," Margaret explained. "And what have you learned during this journey?" "That care is contagious," Amy replied. "Well-cared-for families become caregivers for other families." Richard observed that they had created a virtuous cycle that perpetuated itself naturally. At 19, Gabriel married Bethany, a child psychologist he had met during a conference. The ceremony was simple but moving. "Gabriel," Peter said during his father's speech, "you taught me that children are not their parents' projects, but unique individuals who should be supported to find their own paths." "Margaret," Gabriel said during his own speech, "you taught me that maternal love doesn't depend on biology, but on daily dedication. I promise to care for Bethany with the same dedication you've always shown me." Emma was Gabriel's maid of honor, wearing a dress that Margaret had helped her choose. "Thank you for being the best brother in the world," she said during her speech. "You taught me that men can be kind and strong at the same time." Bethany integrated into the family naturally. Her experience in child psychology perfectly complemented the work Gabriel was developing. "How does it feel to be part of this family?" Amy asked her in a private conversation. "Intimidated and honored at the same time," Bethany answered honestly. "Why?" "Intimidated because you have a very high standard of mutual care. Honored because you accepted me without reservation." "Bethany, family isn't about perfection. It's about intention. If your intention is genuinely to care for all of us, you already belong." 1 year after Gabriel's marriage, Bethany became pregnant. The news brought a special joy to Margaret, who would become a great-grandmother for the first time. How will it be to have 4 generations in the same family? Emma asked. It will be wonderful, Margaret replied. Each generation adds a new perspective on care and love. And I'm going to be an aunt, Emma was excited. You'll be the youngest and most prepared aunt in the United States, Gabriel joked. During Bethany's pregnancy, Emma offered to help with everything related to preparing for the baby. Can I decorate the room? She asked. How do you want to decorate it? Gabriel asked. With animals, of course. But real animals, not drawings. I want my nephew to learn about nature from a very young age. The room decoration done by Emma became an educational work of art. Each animal represented had a small sign explaining its characteristics and habitat. Your nephew will grow up learning biology through the decoration, Margaret observed. That's exactly what I want. For him to learn that animals are important living beings, not just cute little creatures. Gabriel and Bethany's son was born on a spring morning. He was named Michael, in honor of the uncle who had become a fundamental part of the family business. Hello, Michael, Emma said, holding her nephew for the first time. I'm your Aunt Emma, and I'm going to teach you all about animals. Margaret watched 4 generations gathered in the maternity ward and felt an emotion she couldn't describe. From a housekeeper with lost dreams to the matriarch of a dynasty of caregivers. How do you feel, great-grandma? Peter joked. Complete. This child will grow up with more love and opportunities than any of us had. And he'll repay that love by caring for others, Gabriel said, rocking his son. During little Michael's first months of life, the whole family mobilized to care for him, but it was Emma who developed a special connection with her nephew. He stops crying when Emma sings to him, Bethany observed. She has a soothing voice, Amy said. It's not the voice, Gabriel said, watching his sister with his son. It's her energy. Emma naturally radiates calm. Where did she learn that? By growing up in a family where she never had to worry about being loved. She has total emotional security. At 16, Emma took the veterinary school entrance exam and placed first. In her high school graduation speech, she surprised everyone. I want to dedicate my speech to my family, who taught me that no matter what profession you choose, what matters is using it to care for others. And what's your plan? The principal asked. I'll be the first veterinarian in the United States specialized in animal-assisted therapy for hospitalized children. How so? I'll train dogs and other animals to visit pediatric hospitals and help with children's emotional recovery. Emma's idea even impressed Margaret, who had never considered the connection between veterinary medicine and pediatrics. Where did you get this idea? Peter asked. By observing how children at our clinics become happier when they see the resident mascot, and by researching how animals can aid healing. And is it possible to do this professionally? It's a new field, but it's possible. I'll be a pioneer in the United States. During Emma's first year of veterinary school, she began implementing her plans practically. She trained 2 dogs to accompany her on visits to the family clinics. Children respond completely differently when the dogs are present, she reported. How so? Margaret asked. They become more relaxed, ask more questions, cooperate better with exams. And can you measure this? Gabriel helped me create anxiety questionnaires before and after animal-assisted visits. The reduction is significant. The partnership between Gabriel and Emma became a model of collaboration between psychology and veterinary medicine that gained international attention. By the time Emma turned 21, the family had already become a global reference in integrated family care. The Thompson Center received visitors from other countries interested in replicating the model. How do you maintain quality while growing so much? A Japanese delegate asked. By training people in our values, not just our techniques, Peter explained. And how do you ensure the values are properly transmitted? Every new professional spends 1 month living with our family, Emma explained. They see how we operate in practice. And does that work? It works because our values aren't theoretical. They're lived daily, Gabriel added. During a Sunday afternoon, 26 years after Margaret had joined the family, everyone was gathered in the original house's garden, 4 generations playing and talking together. Did you know our story is going to become a history book? Richard said. How so? Amy asked. A textbook publisher wants to include our story in high school sociology books. Our family will be in school books? Little Michael asked, now 3 years old. Yes, Emma answered, to teach other children that family can be built in many ways. That's so cool. Can I tell my friends? You can, Gabriel laughed. But remember to tell the story right. Margaret, at 55, looked at the whole family gathered and made a reflection that summed up the entire journey. You know what moves me the most about all this? What? Peter asked. That we started with a need. I needed work. Peter needed care. Richard needed to learn how to be a present father. And we turned our needs into a life mission. Now we help other people meet their needs. So we turned personal pain into collective healing, Gabriel observed. Exactly. Richard stood up from the chair where he was holding little Michael. Margaret, Peter, Gabriel, Emma, Amy, Michael. He looked at each one. Thank you for teaching me that true success isn't measured by money, but by the number of lives we can touch positively. And thank you all for showing me that family isn't destiny, it's a daily construction, Margaret answered. Peter took Amy's hand and looked at the children. Gabriel, Emma, you taught us that every generation can be better than the previous one when it has love and structure to grow. And you taught us that taking care of people is the best way to live, Gabriel replied. Emma stood up and hugged Margaret. Grandma, thank you for coming into our lives with that otoscope. Without you, I would never have existed. Thank you for giving meaning to all my struggle, my love. Little Michael, who was playing on great-grandpa Richard's lap, suddenly raised his arms to Margaret. Grandma Margaret, you're the best in the world. Why, my love? Because you made our family happy. Margaret picked up her great-grandson, feeling that her whole journey had been worth it. From a woman with no biological children to the matriarch of a family that impacted thousands of lives. Michael, she said to the boy, when you grow up, our family will be even bigger and even more special. How do you know? Because each of us will keep caring and teaching other people to care too. And will I help? You'll help in your own way with your unique talents. Gabriel took Emma by the hand. Sister, thank you for being born to complete our family. Thank you for being the best big brother I could have. Peter and Amy hugged, watching their children. We did it, Amy whispered. Did what? Peter asked. Raise children who know how to love for real. They learned from the best teachers. Peter looked at Margaret and Richard. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Margaret and Richard stayed alone in the living room, as they had done so many times over the years. Richard, do you remember what you said the first day we talked about my family? I remember. I said you had responsibilities. And do you remember what I answered? That sometimes life doesn't let us choose. Well, I was wrong. How so? Life always lets us choose. What we sometimes don't have is the structure or support to make the choices we want. And when we gain that structure, we can choose to turn our pain into healing for others, our difficulty into solutions for other people, our story into inspiration. Is that what we did? That's exactly what we did. Richard smiled, feeling a deep satisfaction. Margaret, if you could go back in time and change something in our story, would you? Change, she thought for a moment. Maybe I'd change just one thing. What? I wish my father had met Peter, Gabriel, and Emma. He'd be proud to see how his teachings about never giving up multiplied through me. Do you think he'd know the impact he had? I think he knew. That's why he taught me to always take care of others even when it was hard to take care of myself. And now you've taught that to 4 generations. And each generation will teach it to the next. The next morning, the family woke up to news none of them expected. The Thompson Center had been selected by the World Health Organization as a pilot model for global implementation. They want us to take our methodology to other countries, Peter asked, still processing the information. Specifically to developing countries, where families face challenges similar to those we faced in the United States, Gabriel read from the official document. And do you agree? Emma asked the adults. Only if we all go together, Richard said. Obviously, Amy replied. The Thompson family doesn't split up. Little Michael, now 5 years old, raised his hand. Can I give my opinion? Of course, Margaret said. I think we should help other families in the world, just like we helped families in the United States. Why? Because when you know how to do something good, it's nice to teach other people. Michael's simple wisdom, echoing words Margaret had said decades before, confirmed that true values perpetuate naturally through generations. 6 months later, the Thompson family embarked on a world tour to implement their model. They visited 17 countries in 2 years, establishing integrated family care centers and training local professionals. How does it feel to be ambassadors of a new concept of family? An international journalist asked. Proud but also responsible, Margaret replied. Our story proves that love and determination can transform lives, but each family needs to build its own version of that formula. What is the most important part of your model? The part that can't be taught. Genuine care, Gabriel answered. Techniques can be replicated, but love needs to be felt and lived. When they returned to the United States after the world tour, they found a country transformed by the multiplication of the centers they had created. There are now 120 family centers operating in the United States, Michael Jr. reported, now in charge of the national administration of the project. And the results? A 30% nationwide reduction in children's mental health problems, a 50% increase in American family satisfaction, and the creation of 10,000 direct jobs in the family care field. Does that mean we changed the country? Emma asked, now 22 years old and a veterinarian. It means we showed the country how to change itself, Peter replied. During a press conference about the national impact of the project, Margaret made a revelation that moved everyone present. When I arrived at the Thompson family's house almost 30 years ago, I was a broken woman with shattered dreams and no hope for the future. And today I am the great-grandmother of a family that positively impacts millions of people, not only in the United States, but in the world. What was the turning point? When I understood that my personal pain could be transformed into healing for others. When Richard gave me the opportunity to go back to school, Peter taught me that motherhood doesn't depend on biology. Gabriel showed me that each generation can expand the love of the previous one. Emma proved to me that care can include all forms of life. And the message for other people in a situation similar to yours? That it's never too late to start over. That true family is about people who choose to care for each other. And that dreams can be postponed, but they don't have to be abandoned forever. Richard asked to make the final comment. Our family proves that when you genuinely invest in people, the return goes far beyond what you imagined. I invested in Margaret's education, expecting to have a better employee. I gained a family that transformed not only our lives, but the lives of thousands of other families. Peter concluded the interview. The most important lesson our family teaches is that true love multiplies. The more you give, the more you have to give. 3 years later, when little Michael turned 8, the same age Peter was when Margaret arrived, the family organized a special celebration. Michael, Margaret said during the birthday dinner, you're starting the age your Uncle Peter was when we met. And what does that mean? It means you'll start to understand better how our family works and maybe discover how you want to contribute to it. I already know how I want to contribute, Michael said seriously. How? I want to be a teacher, to teach other children that family can be any group of people who truly love each other. Gabriel smiled proudly. Why a teacher? Because a teacher teaches many children at once. I can tell our story to many families through the children. And what story would you tell? The story of how a maid with an otoscope became the grandma of a family that helps the whole world. Margaret was moved to hear her journey summarized with such simplicity and accuracy. Michael, that's a very beautiful version of our story. It's the true version, he replied. Grandma, you saved our family before any of us were born. The next morning, Margaret woke up with a feeling of absolute completeness. She looked out the bedroom window and saw 4 generations of the family in the garden. Richard teaching Michael to play soccer, Peter and Gabriel talking about work, Amy and Bethany organizing a picnic, Emma playing with the therapy dogs she had trained. She went down to join them, carrying the photo she had kept for 29 years, herself at 26, holding her diploma for completing her 4th year of medical school before dropping out. "What's that, great-grandma?" Michael asked, seeing the photo. "It's a photo from the time when I hadn't met you yet." "You look sad in the photo." "I was sad. I thought I would never be able to achieve my dreams." "And did you?" "I achieved much more than I dreamed. I dreamed of being a doctor. I became a doctor, a professor, a dean, a writer, and most importantly, I became family to you." Gabriel came closer and looked at the photo. "Grandma, can I keep this photo?" "Why?" "To remember that sad people can become people who make other people happy." "And why is that important?" "So when I treat families who are sad, I can show them that it's possible to change the story." Emma took the photo from Gabriel's hands. "Can I make a copy too?" "What for?" "To put in my future veterinary clinic, to remember that caring for animals is also caring for the families who love those animals." Peter observed how each generation was finding ways to perpetuate the family values through their own professions. "Margaret," he said, "you created much more than a family. You created a movement." "We created," she corrected. "Everyone contributed to get where we are." "And now?" Amy asked. "Now we'll continue doing what we've always done, taking care of each other and teaching other people to do the same," Richard replied. Little Michael raised his hand. "And can I help?" "You're already helping," Margaret said, picking him up. "Just by existing, you remind us every day why everything we do is worth it." On that sunny Sunday afternoon, the Thompson family completed 3 decades of a story that had begun with a hidden otoscope and transformed into a quiet revolution in American family care. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. Do you have a special family in your life? Leave sincere words in the comments about how love can transform lives. Do you believe anyone can build a close-knit family like the Thompsons? We would love to read your honest opinion.